Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Time and Space Transaction. Exchange food for the elf princess at the beginning. Chapter 1. Where did you come from? Is this still domestic? In the pure white small house, Suyi looked at the boundless starry sky outside the window and was completely stunned. The space-time trading platform, could it be real? He is a buyer for a food processing factory and has been working there for 3 years since graduation. He is quite satisfied with this job. The salary of 5,000 a month is not high, but as he is in a purchasing position, he still has some other income, which makes him live well. In addition, the original head of the purchasing department was retiring in old age and had no plans to do anything else. He was the one who made the final decisions in the department, which was not very satisfying. But just last month, the boss's brother-in-law, who had just returned from studying abroad, suddenly landed as the head of the purchasing department and became Suyi's immediate boss. Originally, it was just a matter of replacing the indifferent boss with a manager, and he was indispensable for the oil and water that he should have. However, Suyi never imagined that this new boss seemed to have a serious illness. When he first took office, he said that the sharp rise in international grain futures would inevitably lead to a rise in domestic grain prices, and that he had to stockpile a batch for the factory before grain prices rose. After trying to dissuade him in every possible way to no avail, Suyi looked confused and was urged by him to purchase 1,000 tons of flour and 500 tons of rice to use as raw materials for the food processing factory. Of course, the grain has not increased. After all, this is Kyushu. What does the increase in international grain futures prices have to do with this? The purchase price even dropped by 2 cents this month, causing the factory to lose hundreds of thousands. What Suyi didn't expect even more was that he didn't acknowledge what this guy was doing and put the blame on his head. Yesterday, the boss personally told Suyi that he must dispose of this batch of grain at the original purchase price within a week, otherwise he would pack up and leave. Now that the employment situation is grim, he naturally doesn't want to lose such a good job. After searching around but no one was willing to take it, he opened some online trading platforms to try his luck and see if there are any fools. It turns out, a person with an ID called Time and Space Trading Platform took the initiative to contact him and said that he could buy the grain from him at a high price. Nothing happened, so he chatted with the other party for a few words. The more we chatted, the more outrageous it became. The other party claimed to be a cross-world trading platform that could help him sell things to other worlds. Suyi is not stupid, so of course he doesn't believe it. And then here we are. Suyi took a deep breath and calmed himself down. After looking around, he walked to the long table in the middle of the room and opened a booklet placed on it. Instructions for registration of space-time trading platform. 1. This platform is committed to connecting the multiverse and allowing people in different worlds to communicate with each other. 2. All transactions on this platform must be based on integrity. Counterfeiting, shoddy, substandard, etc. are strictly prohibited in the products traded among platform members. Once discovered, membership rights will be revoked. 3. This platform adopts a membership points system. You can trade for free once a week with all members who have reached long-term trade agreements. Each successful transaction will receive a certain amount of trading points depending on the items traded. The final interpretation right belongs to the platform all. 4. Using transaction points, you can conduct multiple transactions with the same member within a week. Additional transactions can also earn transaction points. At the same time, transaction points can also be used to redeem special props in the platform points mall. 99. Please read the above terms carefully and make sure you fully understand the above content. If you have no objection, sign in the signature box below to become the only member of this platform in the Blue Star area. After becoming a member, you will receive a new member gift package. If you refuse to become a member of this platform, the platform will send you back to Blue Star and erase this memory. Party A. Time and Space Trading Platform. Party B. Suyi carefully read the registration instructions several times. There are no word games in it. The rules of the space-time trading platform are basically written clearly, and these rules are not harsh. He could think of no reason for refusing to sign. And it reminded him of some contents in novels he had read before. A bottle of water can be exchanged for nuclear fusion, and a stone can be an extremely rare treasure in another world. If that were the case, wouldn't it take off in a spiral? Congratulations, you have become a registered member of the Space-Time Trading Platform. Your novice membership gift package has been distributed, please check it carefully. The moment Su-Yi signed his name, the pamphlet in front of him turned into a stream of light and split into two. One of them flew up to the ceiling and went somewhere unknown, while the other landed on Su-Yi's wrist and turned into a weird symbol, which was pretty good looking. Matching card ×1. Storage space. You have a private space with a volume of 100 cubic meters, which can store any items. At the same time, you also have an unlimited space that can be used to store items on the transaction list with other members, excluding living animals. Elementary Life Transaction Permission Card. You can use this card to exchange creatures from other worlds with other members. You do not need to use this card for transactions such as plants and microorganisms. Thousand Worlds Language Access Card. After using it, you can become proficient in the trillions of different languages recorded in this platform from billions of worlds. Intermediate Matching Card. After use, you will be randomly matched with a member who has complementary advantages to you. Hey, they are all good things. Su-Yi couldn't help but his eyes lit up when he saw these things. There is no need to say much about the storage space. Although only 100 cubic meters are available for other uses, it is still a lot. The Life Trading Authority card has not yet seen much value, so we won't talk about it for now. The All Worlds Language Access card is amazing. With this thing, Su-Yi can say that he will never have a language barrier again. As for the intermediate matching cards, there is an article in the platform rules about this. You need a matching card to match other members. The primary matching card is completely random. It's hard to say which transaction object you will match, and it may be completely worthless. As mentioned in the introduction, the mid-level matching card has a high probability of being matched with a member with complementary advantages, and then the two parties can conduct transactions, or even sign a long-term trading contract, and obtain platform points. As for the advanced matching card, it is even more powerful. It can be 100% matched to a high-end world that is willing to support other worlds. If something leaks out of someone's fingers, it's enough to take off in the ordinary world. Su-Yi currently does not have a primary matching card, which means that this is his only initial matching opportunity. If it fails, you will have to wait until next year. In order to take care of new members who have just joined the platform and have no fixed trading partners and no member trading platform, he knew that even if he went back, he would not be able to prepare anything in advance. Simply start matching directly. Wanji Voice Access Card 1, Language Module Loaded. Intermediate Matching Card 1. Searching for trading partners with complementary advantages across time and space. Matching successful. As the prompt sounded, the scene in front of Su-Yi suddenly changed. He left the room in the starry sky and appeared in a simple and solemn grand hall. In front of him was a table carved with complicated textures. He knelt down in front of the table. Opposite him was a woman who was also kneeling in front of another table. A ridiculously beautiful woman with red hair and a gorgeous golden skirt. Are you my trade partner? The woman's red eyes stared at Su-Yi, with an inquiring look in her eyes. Her accent was very strange. Su-Yi was sure that it was not any language known on Blue Star, but it was unexpectedly very pleasant. It should be me. Su-Yi shrugged, stood up and cupped his hands far away and said. My name is Su-Yi. I come from the Blue Star world. What would you call me? The woman glanced at him for a few times, then stood up and performed a ritual similar to that of a knight, and then said seriously. The fourth princess of the Blazing Sun Empire in the Dawn world, the leader of the Red Flame Knights, the Thorn Flower of the wanted to say that there were too many people to sit down. But considering the preciousness of the intermediate matching cards, I still resisted the urge to complain. Nice to meet you, Miss Wei Wei. Time is precious. Can we talk about the transaction now? Can. So what do you need? Food. ? Su-Yi looked at her carefully. The clothes are gorgeous and exquisite, and the face is pretty and rosy. This doesn't look like being short of food or clothing. Seemingly seeing his doubts, Wei Wei explained. The city-state I am in is currently experiencing a war. In order to fight against the evil invaders, we have been fighting each other for 3 full years. Although the city is impregnable, there is not much food stored in the city, so I need food. Lots of food. Got it. Su-Yi smiled and said. We can provide you with a batch of no less than 500 tons of grain within 3 days. If you give me more time to raise money, I can give you more. So, beautiful Miss Wei Wei, what? Wei Wei's eyes lit up. This much food is enough for her soldiers to consume for half a month, which is enough to meet their urgent needs. But then she thought about it and said, what about vegetables, fruits and meat? Can you provide them? These are rare items, and distributing them to soldiers can greatly boost their morale. After thinking for a while, before Su Yi could say anything, she took out an exquisite glass bottle from her personal storage space, which contained some light green liquid, which should be about 500 milliliters. This is the water of life in the Elf Moon Lake. Is it feasible to exchange it for your food? As she spoke, she pulled out the cork. Su Yi immediately smelled a refreshing fragrance. In the past few days, I had been staying up late worrying about work, which had caused me to feel a little depressed. At the same time, introductions to related items also appeared in the trading system. Water of life, spring water that contains rich vitality. Drinking it directly can cure all diseases, prolong life, and enhance physical fitness. Long-term drinking can also promote the evolution of the human body. Please explore more effects by yourself. What a good thing. Su Yi couldn't help but his eyes lit up. Not to mention anything else, just because it can cure all diseases, this water of life is enough to be sold at a sky-high price in Blue Star. However, the system does not mention the usage and dosage of the water of life. The value of this bottle of water of life is hard to determine. And when talking about business, you should naturally try to maximize your own interests. So after thinking for a while, Su Yi stared at Wei Wei, or at a certain accessory on her head and said, if you need fruits, vegetables and meat, I can provide 10 tons, but I'm afraid it will take some time to prepare. As for the value of this water of life, I can't determine its value at the moment. I prefer to trade it with other items, such as gold. This bottle of water of life, I can exchange it for 50 tons of grain. Of course, if after trying it I am sure that its value far exceeds the grain, I will definitely compensate you in the future. You can write this into the transaction contract. Gold. Wei Wei frowned slightly, but she didn't feel displeased. The two worlds are completely different. The process of trading is a process of testing each other's bottom line. She doesn't have a glassy heart, so she won't fall out if others question the function of the water of life. What's more, the water of life she gave was indeed fishy. It was not the original liquid of life from the Elf Moon Lake, but a blended product. In her opinion, the effect was only average, and it was really not worth so much food. After some thought, combined with the value of gold in her world, Wei Wei quoted a price that was contrary to the spirit of chivalry. 1 kilogram of gold can be exchanged for 10 tons of grain. As for the meat. After saying that, she stared into Su Yi's eyes and said very seriously, that's my bottom line. When Su Yi heard this, he couldn't help but breathe a little heavier. Based on the current gold price of more than 550 yuan per gram, the market price of 1 kilogram of gold is not less than 550,000 yuan. Even if it is sold through special channels, you can get at least 400,000 to 500,000 yuan. And the price of 10 tons of grain. Their food processing factory purchases old grains, and the purchase price of flour is less than 2,510 tons, while the rice is even cheaper, less than 2,000 yuan per ton. 10 tons of rice can be sold for as much as 20,000 yuan. This change of hands is a profit of more than 20 times. It's a bloody profit, isn't it? Make a deal. Su Yi nodded decisively. Of course, he could probably guess that since the other party could give such a price, it meant that gold might not be rare in her world. At least more than on Blue Star. Although Wei Wei said verbally that this was the bottom line, as long as he continued to lower the price, he should still be able to earn more. But when it comes to business, you just have to make whatever you have. The current price is already an extremely terrifying profit for him, so there is no need to continue to lower the price. He is not greedy enough to exploit his partners in order to gain more benefits for himself. Everyone can make money, which is a healthy development model. Wei Wei was also visibly relieved when she heard this. As a princess of the Blazing Sun Empire and a genius in magic and martial arts, she is really not very good at negotiating business. Seeing that the other party agreed so quickly, he felt a little more favorable towards Su Yi and decisive. While talking, She opened the box. There was a pile of golden coins inside, which almost blinded Su Yi. Of course, because of the high density of gold, 50 kilograms of gold sounds like a lot, but it actually doesn't look like much. Even this small wooden box is not full. Su Yi glanced at the information displayed on the trading platform. It was indeed gold, and it was pure gold with a purity of over 99.99%. But looking at the gold coins, he couldn't help but think of another question. These golds are all in the form of gold coins, with some complex reliefs carved on them. If you take it back like this, how to take action will be a big problem. He can't really have to buy a set of equipment and melt all this gold, right? After thinking about it, Su Yi directly expressed his concerns to Wei Wei. There is nothing to hide. The existence of the trading platform is definitely the biggest secret in their respective worlds for their members. After Wei Wei obtained the food from him, she had to find a way to conceal the source of the food, so she understood the problem he was talking about and said immediately. It's simple, you can make them whatever you want them to be. As soon as she finished speaking, her crimson eyes seemed, not as if, but actually lit with flames. Su Yi only felt a terrifying breath burst out from her body. The next moment, scorching flames appeared out of thin air, instantly melting the pile of gold coins into a ball of gold water, which was bound by an invisible force and floated in the air. Trading platforms are not allowed to attack each other and have very strict contract terms. However, it will not hinder members from using their abilities in the space. When Su Yi heard Wei Wei talking about the elves and the water of life before, he could probably guess that the other party came from a fantasy magical world. But when he saw this supernatural power with his own eyes, the shock to him was still indescribable. Awesome. After the shock, he could only give a two-word evaluation. Wei Wei tilted her head and asked, "What kind of gold is easier to sell over there?" Su Yi came to her senses and quickly described Jin Yuanbao's appearance to her. He originally thought that Wei Wei had some similar magic that could control the golden water to become what he wanted. Unexpectedly, after figuring out what a gold ingot looked like, Wei Wei directly dipped her slender hands into the suspended thick gold water, and quickly rubbed a solid large ingot into his hand. Su Yi, what kind of ruthless iron hand is this? Didn't anyone tell you when you were learning magic that you were not allowed to use magic in front of muggles? Until I left the trading platform and returned to my little nest in Blue Star. Su Yi looked at the still heated gold ingot in the box, and everyone was still confused. The melting point of gold is not considered high among metals, but it must be over 1,000 degrees. If a normal person touches the molten gold water, his bones will probably be burned to ashes. Is it scientific to directly rub gold water with your hands without even breaking the skin? Is this reasonable? What the hell? Su Yi secretly cursed for being nosy, and then looked at the 10 gold ingots in front of him with his heart beating wildly. One is a full 5 kilograms, a total of 50 kilograms. According to the current gold price, the total price of this box of items exceeds 27 million. Even if he sells through abnormal channels, he can still get at least more than 20 million. The work problem that had troubled him for a while was finally solved. Wait, work? Why do I need to work when I have so much gold? After we finish this job and get the food, we will fire this idiot boss and superior. Su Yi already has a plan. First, I exchanged some of the gold for money, and then used the money to buy this batch of grain that is without qualifications, but now the factory is eager to get rid of this batch of grain, and he is the person in charge of this matter, so there is too much room for maneuver. Fortunately, he has this relationship, otherwise Su Yi would not dare to say that he would be able to supply Wei Wei's large demand for food. But the premise of everything is that he must first cash out the gold. The state's supervision of gold trading is relatively strict. A small amount is fine, but if you make a large amount, you may have to go in and drink tea. That's sloppy. She should be asked to rub Jin Yuanbao into a smaller size. Looking at the large gold weight weighing 5 kilograms, Su Yi couldn't help but scratch his head. After thinking for a long time, he couldn't come up with a good solution, so he had to go out temporarily and buy an angle grinder. I didn't care whether some gold chips would be lost during the cutting process, so I picked up a gold ingot and cut it into pieces directly. It was directly cut into 8 gold nuggets ranging in weight from 500 grams to 1,000 grams. The next step is how to deal with it. It is actually feasible to take it directly to a gold store to sell it. If he spreads out more, he shouldn't be targeted even if he shoots a few kilograms. If you ask, it's passed down from our ancestors. It's okay if my ancestors are rich, right? But if you want to go one step further and sell more, formal channels like gold shops will definitely not work. I don't know if Lao Lu can eat this. Looking at a number on his phone, Su Yi hesitated whether to call and ask. As a factory purchaser, there will naturally be some suppliers who will give him some small gifts from time to time. These small gifts may not be useful to him, but they are definitely valuable. Su Yi usually chooses to take action. Most of the time, things will be given to this old Lu. As far as he knew, Lao Lu's business was quite big, and he occasionally produced a bottle or two of wine or some tea. For Lao Lu, he can only be regarded as a scrap customer. Some big clients will come to him to sell luxury goods, cars, and even antiques, calligraphy and paintings worth hundreds of thousands or millions. Of course, Lao Lu was not an underground gangster, and Su Yi couldn't get in touch with such a person. He is an intermediary who specializes in this business, and there are other people behind him. Although intermediaries are often criticized for being too dark, they can indeed help laypeople avoid a lot of trouble in many cases. Ask first and then tell. Su Yi called directly, and the call was quickly connected. After a brief greeting, he went straight to the topic. Old Lu, I have some gold in my hand. I wonder if you will accept it. Gold. Old Lu on the other end of the phone was stunned for a moment. He obviously didn't expect Su Yi, a small factory purchasing manager, to have such a good thing in his hands, but he still said quickly. What's the origin? Heirloom. I understand. Lao Lu chuckled. Don't worry, Xiao Su, gold is hard currency. I'll handle it for you no matter how many brothers you have. 3 kilograms. Su Yi reported a number that he had thought about for a long time. Hiss, Brother Su, you have made a fortune. 3 kilograms, can be eaten, but the price must be slightly lower than the price of gold on the market. Let's see if you can accept it. Old Lu was not too surprised when he heard this. Normally, a few hundred grams or even a kilogram of gold can be sold directly through the regular procedures of a gold store. Where is the use of his method? The two discussed it carefully and finally agreed to meet in a high-end business club in the center of Zhongcheng City within an hour. This kind of place has enough confidentiality and is located in a downtown area, so it is not afraid of special circumstances. Of course, the most important thing is that 3 kilograms of gold is a lot less, but it is not really a lot. Even based on the gold price on the market, it is only over 1.6 million Kyushu coins. The business that Lao Lu and the others are engaged in is no different from other industries. It is a huge profit in itself, but reputation are more important than some petty profits, and they are not willing to ruin their own brand for these millions. After hanging up the phone, Su Yi began to settle accounts. The price Lao Lu gave him was about 450 Kyushu coins for 1 gram of gold. Of course, this was a preliminary estimate. Professionals would then inspect the purity of the gold, and the specific price would depend on the purity. And based on the price of 450 per gram, if 3 kilograms of gold were sold to Lao Lu, Su could get 1.35 million. If the first batch of 500 tons of grain promised to Weiwei is all given to rice, the 500 tons of old rice from the factory will cost less than 2 yuan per kilogram, and can be purchased for less than 1 million yuan. If you have more than 300,000 yuan left to buy some fruits, vegetables and frozen meat, it will definitely be no problem to make up 10 tons. This batch of gold was enough for him to complete his first transaction. He immediately picked out 3 pieces from the pile of cut gold nuggets, weighing about 3.4 kilograms, stuffed them into his backpack and went out. The rest was put into his personal space. At around 7 o'clock in the evening, Su Yi arrived at the business club that had been arranged before and found Lao Lu in a very hidden private room. When a transaction involving millions of dollars was involved, old Lu, the intermediary, naturally couldn't make the decision. At this time, there were already 4 or 5 people who Su Yi didn't know waiting in the private room. There are also some tools lying around. The transaction process was simpler than Su Yi had thought before. He took out the gold, and Lao Lu's people took out professional equipment to check it and then quoted a price of 470 per gram, which was higher than previously estimated. A total of 3,439.257 grams of gold, with a total price of 1,616,450.79. Lao Lu took the initiative to collect a total of 1.62 million for him and paid him face to face. The account from which the payment was made was a foreign trade company, and the remark was the virtual asset transfer fee. The tax issue would be resolved there. The money Su Yi received was pure after-tax personal income. He carefully checked the process and determined that there were no problems, then the transaction was considered successfully completed. During the whole process, the other party did not ask about the origin of this batch of gold, and except for a few words between Lao Lu and Su Yi, no one else said a word. This is called professionalism. After politely declining Lao Lu's offer to treat him to dinner, he was sent out politely. As I guessed before, people who do this kind of work don't want to do tricks to take advantage of others just for $1 million. Seeing the extra 1 million in Cali, Su Yi let out a sigh of relief. I suddenly felt that the world was wider. Then he looked around, preparing to find a place to have dinner. But just at this moment, a phone call suddenly came in. It was the factory owner's brother-in-law, Su Yi's new idiot boss, Lu Sheng. If you call me at this point, you don't have to think twice to know that this guy is going to ask about that batch of grain. A few hours ago, it would have been a bit difficult for Su Yi to answer the phone or not. Don't take it, for fear of losing your job. Take it, it's probably a lot of scolding, and it has become someone's punching bag. But now the situation is a little different. Su Yi sneered and directly chose to connect. Hello, who is this? I, Lu Sheng, with that batch of grain, you. Oh, it's Xiao Lu. This is a bit noisy. I'll hang up now. You can wait a moment. I'll call you when I'm free. Do. Listening to the busy signal on the phone, Lu Sheng looked a little confused. If he heard correctly, Su Yi just called him Xiao Lu. After being stunned for a while, he finally reacted and slapped his hand on the desk. Reverse Tiangong. Rebel against Tiangong. With that said, he dialed the phone again. However, this time Su Yi's voice was not even heard, and the call was hung up directly. Lu Sheng was so angry that he almost smashed the computers in his office. Su Yi looked at the constant calls and directly marked Lu Sheng's number for harassing calls and blocked him, all at once. After that, we found a restaurant and had a quiet dinner. As for the furious Lu Sheng, he didn't even bother to pay attention. Now he wants the batch of grain from the factory, but that doesn't mean he has to lick Lu Sheng. Anyway, after finishing this job, he didn't intend to take it anymore. It was an hour later when he had enough to eat and drink. At this moment, the boss Li Wenyuan called as expected. Only then did Su Yi choose to answer. Is it Xiao Su? I heard that you didn't even answer the supervisor's call. Is there something urgent? Obviously, Lu Sheng went to complain to his brother-in-law after being blocked by Su Yi. Su Yi felt a little funny and said nonchalantly, "It's really urgent. I need to eat." With the client, Li Wenyuan's eyes suddenly lit up. To be honest, as the boss of the factory, he has been under a lot of pressure recently. My wife's idiot brother did such an outrageous operation as soon as he entered the factory. When the shareholders found out, they were very dissatisfied and asked him to give an explanation. But what explanation can he give? You can't kick your brother-in-law, right? Do you want your wife anymore? In desperation, he could only listen to Lu Sheng's suggestion and let Su Yi from the purchasing department, who had always performed well, take the blame. When Su Yi couldn't bear it anymore and resigned, he would naturally be able to arrange his own people for other shareholders and appease the dissatisfied shareholders when his lucrative position became vacant. Yes, Li Wenyuan didn't think Su Yi could get rid of this batch of grain. Letting him do this is just to force him to leave. But now from Su Yi's words, it seems that he is discussing business with a client. This made Li Wenyuan feel some hope. What if Su Yi could really do it, not only would he be able to feel proud in front of shareholders, but he would also not have to fire a capable person like Su Yi. In this kind of small private factory, all key positions are assigned by the top management of the factory. If you can't do things well, you can just mess around and get side jobs. There are only so many people who can work. If he wasn't forced to do so, Li Wenyuan really wouldn't be willing to fire Su Yi and replace him with an idiot who didn't know anything about it. No, I'll eat it by myself. Su Yi's answer immediately dashed Li Wenyuan's glimmer of hope, and his face suddenly turned cold. After pondering for a moment, he turned to ask, "How is the food issue going?" He was going to give the employee who was about to be forced out by him a beating. Su Yi said lightly, "I contacted a boss and we're almost done talking about it. The first batch of rice is only for 500 tons. The price will be based on our previous purchase price, but the freight will have to be paid by the factory. If Mr. Li thinks it's okay, we can arrange for the truck to be loaded tomorrow morning, and the money will be loaded on site." Li Wenyuan was stunned for a moment, then quickly said, "Have we really agreed? Where is the boss? Where do we want to transport the food? If it's too far away, I'm afraid the freight will have to be discussed carefully. To move all 500 tons of grain, at least 10 semi-trailers would be needed. If it is sent thousands of kilometers away, the freight will cost hundreds of thousands, which is more than the loss of the food itself. Naturally, you have to ask first. The boss is a relative of mine, and he has given me full authority to handle this matter. The place should be a warehouse on Li Wenyuan has a net worth of about 50 to 60 million. In a place like Zhongcheng, it can only be regarded as more than above or below. But no matter what, the mere loss of hundreds of thousands in the factory is nothing to him. He can completely fill this hole for his brother-in-law. But rich people like him, who are neither above nor below, are often stingier than ordinary people, and naturally they are not willing to spend money to fill the hole. And Su Yi's move allowed him not to have to pay for losses himself, but also to silence shareholders. It is undoubtedly the best outcome for him. When the conversation, he had worked in a food processing factory for 3 years, and he was very familiar with the situation. It can be regarded as a win-win cooperation with Li Wenyuan and Lu Shang. But these two guys wanted him to take the blame first. Su Yi was not temperamental. It was impossible for him to help them deal with the trouble and then just leave. Laugh, you won't be able to laugh anymore soon. After that, he turned to another phone number. As a factory purchaser, he is very familiar with the business of temporarily renting warehouses. Deng even rented a small warehouse in a logistics distribution center on the outskirts of Zhongcheng, which will be used to store food tomorrow. Early the next morning, Su Yi rushed to the factory. It is estimated that Li Wenyuan knew that Lu Sheng and Su Yi had conflicts. Lu Sheng, the nominal head of the purchasing department, did not show up today. Li Wenyuan came over to take a look and left. So Su Yi was both the person in charge of selling grain here in the factory and the person in charge of receiving grain there. Under his deliberate carelessness, many less important things were naturally omitted. No one even asked whether the person buying the food was an individual or a company, or what it was used for. Signing contracts, loading grain onto trucks, and paying money. Done in one go. Su Yi arrived at the factory at 8 in the morning, and before 11 o'clock at noon, 10 semi-trailers loaded with grain had arrived at the suburban warehouse he rented. Before 2 o'clock in the afternoon, all 500 tons of grain had been moved into the warehouse. After treating the driver and porters to a meal, the first batch of 500 tons of grain was all obtained. Of the more than 1.6 million Kyushu coins he had just obtained yesterday, he only had more than 600,000 left. There is no rush for the remaining 10 tons of fruits, vegetables and meat. After everyone else left, he carefully checked the inside of the warehouse. After making sure that there was no surveillance or anything like that, he directly put all the grain into the storage space dedicated to trading items. Then go straight to the trading platform and contact Wei Wei to receive the goods. When she saw Su Yi transferring 500 tons of grain through the trading space, Wei Wei's red eyes flashed with unconcealable surprise. "I have raised so much food so quickly. Thank you so much. Is 500 tons of grain a lot?" In fact, for Wei Wei, an imperial princess from another world, not much. Even for her city-state, which had run out of ammunition and food, it was not much. There are more than 30,000 soldiers and more than 300,000 civilians in her city-state. Even if the 500 tons of grain placed in her place were distributed strictly to ensure that no one in the city starved to death, it would only be enough for 3 days at most. What really surprised Wei Wei was the speed at which Su Yi raised food. In less than a day, 500 tons of grain were raised. In her opinion, bulk grain is a strategic material no matter where it is, and it is absolutely impossible for ordinary people to obtain so much grain in a short period of time. So Wei Wei guessed that Su Yi was definitely a big shot with a high status in his world. Having such a person as her first partner on the trading platform is definitely a good thing in her opinion. When she saw the grain, Wei Wei already had plans to establish a good relationship with the other party and make long-term transactions. Even, Wei Wei's eyes flashed and she thought of something. After all, people cannot understand things beyond their own cognition. It is still a bit difficult for a feudal lord from another world to understand how abundant basic materials are in modern society after industrialization. Su Yi didn't know what the princess in front of him was thinking. After hearing her thanks, she just said politely, "That's right, Miss Wei Wei is too polite. 10 tons of fruits, vegetables and meat should be given to you tomorrow. If you need it, I can raise 1,000 tons of food in 3 days. There are still 1,000 tons of flour that have not been processed in the factory, and that stuff is the biggest loser. It is definitely much easier to buy than this batch of rice. 1,000 tons. Of course it is necessary." Wei Wei's eyes suddenly lit up and she said quickly, "Is it still these rice?" "That's not true, it's a batch of flour. The products in different worlds may be different. The wheat and rice on Blue Star may not be available in Wei Wei's world, and she may not necessarily know how to use them. But the great thing about the trading platform is that after Su Yi proposed what he wanted to trade, the platform would use an incomprehensible way to let Wei Wei know what it was, how to use it, and what its use was. The reverse is also true. The cost of understanding is greatly reduced. After understanding what flour is, Wei Wei will naturally not let go of this 1,000 tons of flour. Considering that the calories provided by rice and noodles were about the same, she proposed the same price as yesterday. Or 1 kilogram of gold for 10 tons of grain. However, Su Yi didn't really want gold anymore. The main reason is that he still doesn't know how to sell the more than 40 kilograms of gold left on his hands. If he dared to ask that old Lu to sell so much gold at once, he was afraid that his body would appear in the river tomorrow morning. People don't want to smash signs because of small profits, but dozens of kilograms of gold of unknown origin are not small profits, enough to make people take risks. Although it only costs tens of millions, gold, a hard currency, still has no origin and cannot be traced back to its origins. For some wealthy people, the actual value is much higher than tens of millions of regulated cash. He thought for a while and said, "I wonder if Miss Wei Wei has the kind of props that even people who don't know magic can use. Just something that can be used for self-defense. If anything, it's better to use this trade." With force at his side, he also had the confidence to use the remaining gold on hand without fear of being cheated. Hearing his request, Wei Wei raised her eyebrows, then showed a playful smile. "I do have magic props that ordinary people can use. But if Mr. Su Yi is worried about safety issues, I have a better suggestion here." As she spoke, a card appeared in her hand. Su Yi knows this thing because he also has one. Elementary Life Transaction Permission Card. "Miss Wei Wei, what do you mean?" Su Yi narrowed his eyes. "Nothing else. 1,000 tons of grain. How about I give you a powerful elf warrior with magic and martial arts skills?" Wei Wei said with a smile. There seemed to be some impatience in the smile. "How strong?" "Probably a little better than me." Wei Wei spread her hands. "Of course, I also have some conditions. If I give her to you, she can be responsible for your safety. You must also ensure her basic living needs and meet some of her reasonable needs, and you must not force her to do anything other than protect your safety. Besides, there are things she doesn't want to do. In case you really can't get along, or her strength can't protect your safety, then I can issue another Elementary Life Trading Authority card to redeem her. These all need to be written into the transaction contract." Wei Wei didn't know much about Su Yi's situation, so naturally she didn't know the level of the person she wanted to send to Su Yi. "I can only use myself as an example. After all, her strength has been demonstrated in front of Su Yi before." Su Yi pondered for a moment after hearing the words, mainly thinking about whether it would be difficult for a gangster from another world to move around in Blue Star's Kyushu. After a moment he nodded and said, "Can. As for whether a person from another world will be obedient after going to Blue Star, he does not need to consider it. When trading creatures through the Elementary Life Trading Authority card, there are restrictions on the trading platform. You can only obey the buyer's orders and take whatever you want. Life and death are all at the buyer's discretion. To put it harshly, there is no difference between being a slave. That's why Wei Wei had so many concerns and put forward a bunch of prerequisites. As a buyer, Su Yi did not have these concerns. After receiving the affirmative answer, Wei Wei breathed a visible sigh of relief, as if a big stone had fallen from her heart. Then he quickly said, "Just wait a moment, I'll bring you here right away." With that said, she disappeared into the trading space. A moment later, Wei Wei and someone appeared in the hall where the two were discussing business. Naturally, her elementary life trading authority card is gone too. After seeing the people she brought, even though Su Yi had watched many entertainment works and was mentally prepared for the so-called elves to be good-looking, she still couldn't help but take a breath. This thing seems a bit too beautiful, right? Sai Shui's skin is not as rough as the white people of Blue Star. It is white and extremely delicate at the same time. Her facial features are delicate and soft, her eyes are moving between her frown and her smile, and there is a playful dimple at the corner of her mouth. She stood there without saying a word, and couldn't help but make people feel good about her, as if she was born to be liked. At this moment, Su Yi seemed to suddenly understand the meaning of what Cao Ji said in Luo Shen Fu, bright eyes are good at gazing, and the dimples assist in power. The beauty is beautiful, the appearance is quiet, the body is leisurely. The tenderness is charming, and the words are charming. So beautiful, you must be Mr. Su Yi, right? My name is Yu Ling, and I am honored to be your guardian knight. The tall and beautiful elf walked up to Su Yi, put one hand on his chest, and gave him a knight's salute from another world. Su Yi was stunned for a moment and looked at Wei Wei. Wei Wei explained, "In our world, what you want her to do is to make her your guardian knight. After taking the oath of protection, she needs to fulfill her promise throughout her life. If she betrays her one day, she will definitely be burned by the fire of hell." The punishment of burning in hell fire. Su Yi raised his eyebrows. "Oh, this is part of the oath. It has no actual binding force, but don't worry, if she is willing to make the oath today, she will definitely do it." "I understand, it's like swearing that there will be 5 thunderbolts every day." Su Yi nodded, but didn't care. Anyway, there are stronger constraints on the trading platform. Under Wei Wei's guidance, he put his hand on Yu Ling's head, and then read some words to Wei Wei that sounded incomprehensible to Su Yi, and the ceremony was completed. The two of them completed a trading platform contract, and this beautiful elf became Su Yi's person. Until he returned to Blue Star's warehouse and looked at the beautiful elf beside him, Su Yi was still a little overwhelmed for a while. Inexplicably, I picked up an elf from another world who can fight and look pretty for nothing, but that's okay. But when he thought about it carefully, he felt that something was not right. According to Wei Wei, she is relatively capable in that world. And Yu Ling is stronger than her. In this world of extraordinary power, the value of a strong man should not be comparable to that of 1,000 tons of grain, right? Su Yi didn't think so much before. Anyway, with the trading platform as a guarantee, Wei Wei couldn't do anything. But now that I think about it carefully, I still feel something is wrong. Simply because the person involved was here now, he asked his doubts directly. Yu Ling was not surprised that he would ask this, and answered calmly. "Because if I continue to stay there, my own strength will not be able to bring much help to Princess Wei Wei. Instead, it will be a trouble. The coalition forces attacking Mengchuan City have many reasons for launching this war, and I happen to be one of them. As long as I leave Mengchuan City, the part of the coalition forces that came against me will retreat, and the pressure on Mengchuan City will be great, reduce. Before, I had nowhere to go. Princess Wei Wei took me in under huge pressure because of her friendship with the elves and me. Now that I have a better place to live, it will alleviate the pressure on Mengchuan City. Naturally I won't ask for more." "So, your identity is unusual." Su Yi looked at this beautiful elf in surprise. He thought that Yu Ling was Wei Wei's maid or personal bodyguard, so that Wei Wei, as the lord, could easily sell her to another world. Now it seems that there is another hidden reason behind this matter. That's another story. Yu Ling smiled helplessly and briefly explained the whole story. In fact, it is not complicated, it is just a cliché story of racial infighting. The Moon Elf tribe she belonged to was once the most powerful tribe in the Elf Kingdom, controlling the most important spring of life in the Elf tribe. Later, a tribe called the Dark Elves in the Elf Kingdom united with the Orcs to defeat the Moon Elf and became the new master of the Elf Kingdom. It's okay for Yuling to be the princess of the subjugated country, but on the eve of the country's subjugation, the high priest of the Moon Elf tribe magically sealed the core of the Elf tribe's spring of life, a thing called vitality, in Yuling's body, and at the same time made her it took away all the water accumulated by the fountain of life. What is this concept? The spring water from the spring of life flows into the lake, and after being diluted countless times, it becomes the world-famous Moon Lake in their place. The water in the lake is not called water, that thing is called the original liquid of life. The original liquid of life was diluted countless times to become the water of life that Wei Wei had traded to Su Yi before. It can be said that this fountain of life is the most precious wealth of the elves. After losing its core components, this thing has now come to a standstill. It's no wonder that the new owner of the Elf Kingdom, Shengchongbaloaxiawankwan, wanted to find her, the former princess, and Wei Wei had no choice but to send her to another world. I probably understand. After understanding Yuling's identity and background, Su Yi had no doubts about this transaction. If I had to say something, it was that he felt that he might have suffered a loss in this matter. She obviously did Wei Wei a big favor by accepting Yuling to come to Blue Star, but this woman actually asked him for 1,000 tons of food. My conscience is really bad. After briefly getting to know each other and giving Yuling some precautions, Su Yi took her out of the warehouse. Su Yi didn't have a very specific idea of how strong Yuling was. But after seeing her twist a piece of rebar as thick as a baby's arm in the corner of the warehouse into a twist, he knew it was safe. With Yuling by his side to protect him, those underground forces who couldn't get on the stage would definitely be unable to do anything to him. He can rest assured that he will give away all the gold in his hands through Lao Lu. This kind of thing should happen sooner rather than later. Su Yidong even contacted Lao Lu again and made a request to trade 20 kilograms of gold. This time, Lao Lu did not dare to agree directly. He only said that he would ask the boss above and asked Su Yi to wait for news. It was something that was expected, but he was not surprised. After all these things were resolved, Su Yi realized that there suddenly seemed to be nothing left to do. It was just after 5 o'clock in the evening. He looked at Yuling, who was quietly sitting in the passenger seat. Have you brought a change of clothes? How about I take you to buy a few sets of clothes? There is a special magic circle in my suit. It can clean itself and does not need to be changed. Yuling shook her head absent-mindedly. Although this was just a suburb of Zhongcheng, the various buildings and various vehicles driving on the road still shocked her, a visitor from another world. When she heard that Wei Wei was going to send her to a strange world before coming, she never expected that she would come to such a strange place. Everything here seemed different from where she had been before. It is inevitable that your attention will be attracted by all kinds of novel things. However, she was introverted. Seeing that Su Yi had been communicating with others through mobile phones and driving, she looked very busy, so she did not ask directly. What a good thing. Su Yi took the time to glance at her beautiful long dress and made up her mind that she would have to ask Wei Wei to get some things in this area in the future. Clothes that don't need to be washed will definitely sell out. But one size fits all. Regarding buying clothes, Su Yi still insisted. Your clothes are a bit different from the mainstream style here. If you keep wearing this, you will inevitably look different when you go out. I'd better buy you a few sets. Reasonable and convincing. Yuling didn't have to insist on wearing her own clothes. After hearing this, she said warmly, "Okay, it's up to you." After hearing this, Su Yi nodded with satisfaction and drove straight to the mall. Black stockings, white stockings, JK, He didn't dare to think how good these would look on Yuling, who has a perfect figure that looks like a clothes rack at first glance. Ahem, in fact, these are all incidental. Su Yi mainly wanted to give her a few sets of clothes to make her look less unusual and help her quickly adapt to modern life, that's all. And in addition to clothes, she also had to buy some other things for her. Like a cell phone or something. This is a necessity to integrate into Blue Star's life. She can learn it slowly if she doesn't know how to use it. Anyway, Su Yi is not short of this money now. As for the problem of language barrier, it is easier to solve. He had seen it in the points mall of the trading platform before. There was a prop that was one level lower than the world language penetration card. It was called the World Language Penetration Card. After using it, people could quickly understand all the things in a world language. The selling price only requires 10 points. At present, Su Yi and Wei Wei have completed a transaction, and he has gained 8 points. If this continues, he feels that after trading the 10 tons of fruits, vegetables, meat or the remaining 1,000 tons of flour, the points will be enough. Just give her a whole piece when the time comes. This is much easier than teaching her to learn Kyushu dialect from scratch. Su Yi didn't go to any high-end shopping malls like SKP, but found a nearby Chianda Plaza. It was similar to what he had guessed before coming. As soon as he took Yu Ling out of the parking lot, she became the center of attention of the mall crowd. There is no way, the elf girl is too beautiful. And I don't know if her dress is blessed by some magic. Not only is it gorgeous, but the dress itself seems to have its own lighting. When the light was dim, everyone else's style seemed to be in a black and white photo, and she seemed to be the only person with color in the photo. Ambilight and dazzling. It's hard not to attract attention. After a while, a man with a camera came over. Hello, beauty, I am a street photography blogger on a certain video. You are so beautiful and have the best temperament among the girls I have ever seen. Can I take some photos of you? I'll just take some of your time. Give it some time and it'll be fine soon. As he said that, he looked at Yu Ling expectantly. With the image of this beautiful woman in front of him, he knew that it would definitely become popular after it was uploaded to the internet without even having to film it. That's all money. As for being rejected, he didn't think about it at all. In his opinion, Yu Ling's outfit was just for cosplay. This kind of people are too late to be happy when they meet a professional photographer to take pictures on the road, so how could they refuse? If people are satisfied with the photos taken by then, they can probably add a WeChat message. Although adding it may not necessarily help you, having the contact information of such a beautiful woman is once again bragging rights when gathering with friends. Maybe we can continue to cooperate in the future and post more photos to attract traffic to our video account. As for Su Yi, who was walking with Yu Ling, the photographer didn't even take a look. He is indeed quite handsome, no worse than any of you readers, but his dressing style is that of an ordinary person, nothing eye-catching. He is indeed a natural handsome guy. But on the internet, as long as the appearance aspect does not reach the level of exaggeration like Yu Ling, and if you put on makeup and fix the pictures, the gap between everyone will not be very big. Moreover, his street photography account or Su Yidong's disapproval of him taking the photo of Yu Ling. I'm just kidding, in this age, how can a woman take a photo and still need the consent of her male partner? However, and then looked at Su Yi, as if waiting for him to make a decision. Su Yi said without thinking, sorry, we have other things to do and it's not convenient right now. If the guy in front of me is really a street-style blogger with a certain number of fans, with Yu Ling's image and temperament, he will definitely become popular if he takes a photo. But the problem is that Yu Ling is a gangster. Su Yi didn't want her to be exposed on the internet. Can't you just take a little while? I'll just take a few pictures, very quickly. The photographer was a little anxious after hearing this. He squatted all afternoon and finally got such a beautiful one, so naturally he didn't want to let it go. Sorry, not available. She is relatively introverted and doesn't like being photographed, let alone being posted online. Su Yi smiled, ignored him, and walked towards the mall with Yu Ling. For this reason, even if the photographer is still a little unwilling, he can only give up. Although he wanted to secretly take a few photos, he gave up this dangerous idea after remembering the warning in Su Yi's words just now. Yu Ling is so beautiful, if she takes a photo and posts it on the internet, it will definitely become a hit. If you do this when someone clearly refuses to take pictures, if the other party is serious, they may be sued. He didn't want to take the risk. The trip to the mall actually didn't take long. Although Yu Ling is very curious about everything here, she has an introverted personality and focuses on seeing more and talking less. From beginning to end, Su Yi decides what clothes to buy and even what style of underwear to buy. Sometimes I met some shop assistants who wanted to say a few words or take a photo with her because they saw her beauty, but Su Yi always refused. Don't ask. If you ask, you will be deaf, mute and introverted. I can't understand what you are saying and don't want to communicate with you. So, under the regretful eyes of countless clerks, Yu Ling followed Su Yi, carrying large and small bags in her hands, and entered a hot pot restaurant in a daze. The good news is that as an elf, she has no taboos and can eat both meat and vegetables. The bad news is that although Yuling is strong, she can't take spicy food. Seeing that she was sweating profusely and her face was red from the heat, Suyi could only be a little funny and ask the clerk to change the mandarin duck pot halfway. It was already past 8 o'clock in the evening when we came out after dinner. Suyi took Yuling to the first floor of the shopping mall to buy her a mobile phone. He has also used his own mobile phone for a long time, and now that he has money, he can replace it with him. Then get her a phone card. It doesn't matter if Yuling doesn't have an ID card, Suyi you can. Nowadays, you can open a supplementary card for phone cards, so it's not a big problem. He doesn't play mobile games, so he doesn't have high requirements for his mobile phone. It should be reliable enough and not crash or disconnect from the internet every now and then. At this point, the one that best meets his requirements is Warwick. So there is nothing to hesitate when choosing a mobile phone brand. Go straight to the Warwick counter on the first floor. However, what Suyi didn't expect was that as soon as he entered the store, he met an acquaintance. It's not right to say they are acquaintances. It can only be said that they have met each other and had a meal together. To put it bluntly, it is a blind date. 3 years after graduation, he was already 25 years old, so his family naturally kept urging him to find a partner. Just last month, Suyi was half urged and half rushed by her mother to have her first blind date in her life. The woman is a relative of the neighbor downstairs in her hometown, named Zhao Lulu. Same age as Suyi. His appearance is about 6 or 7 points. Occupation: I'm studying at home to take the public exam, and I heard that I will also host a live broadcast on a certain music channel while studying, and my income will be about 3,000 to 5,000 a month. It means the buff stack is full. The actual situation did not surprise him. This girl made a lot of messy demands as soon as she came. What about handing over her salary after they get together? What about Suyi needing to give her at least 8,000 yuan a month to support her in taking the civil service exam? What about live broadcasting being her hobby, and occasionally talking to the interaction between water friends will be a bit ambiguous and Suyi can't control it? This is the more pungent among them. The other mess asked for more. To this, Suyi's answer was of course, yes, yes, yes. He had no intention of making it happen anyway, so he just obeyed and it was over. Originally, he wanted to leave after eating and never contact him again. As a result, I never expected that this girl was not being naive. Seeing him keep saying, yes, yes, everything you said is right, she really thought that Suyi had accepted his conditions in full. After returning home, he sent various messages to Suyi every day, and even took the initiative to ask him for red envelopes and milk tea. Even after being ignored by him countless times, he remained undaunted. In the end, Suyi was so annoyed that he blocked her directly and settled down. After telling my mother about the situation, she knew it was such a weird thing and didn't say anything else. He originally thought the matter would be over here. Unexpectedly, I casually took Yuling out to buy a mobile phone and met this guy again. What an evil fate this is. It's embarrassing enough to go out and meet someone you've blocked on a blind date. What's even more frightening is that the other party doesn't feel embarrassed. As soon as Suyi and Yuling entered the store, they glared at Zhao Lulu. Zhao Lulu was obviously stunned for a moment, but then her eyes showed a look of dissatisfaction, and she pulled the vengeance brother who had been looking for it and walked straight over. Without caring about the current situation, she directly asked, "Why did you delete my WeChat message?" "Because you have that serious illness." Suyi's mouth twitched, then shook his head, too lazy to pay attention to her. The real version T0 does not refer to a certain gender, but to those groups who behave roguely whenever something happens. This is a serious version of T0, why are you trying to break up with her? Finish your work and leave quickly, as you will have to arrange a place for Yuling to stay later. I'm talking to you, can't you hear me? However, he didn't want to pay attention to it, but Zhao Lulu refused to let him go. He actually grabbed Suyi's arm in public, as if he wouldn't let him go unless he gave an explanation today. She is hostile to you, do you need me to deal with it? Yuling's eyes were cold, but remembering what Suyi had explained before, she did not take action directly. Instead, she leaned into Su Yi's ear and asked. Su Yi thought for a moment and then whispered. Do you have the kind of magic that won't hurt people, but will make people feel more uncomfortable? If she really keeps insisting, teach her a lesson. The two of them communicated in the language of Yuling's world, and their voices were kept very low, so they were not afraid of being overheard. Zhao Lulu suddenly became even more unhappy when she saw that Su Yi still ignored her and was talking intimately to a pretty and outrageous woman next to her. Deng Ji pointed at him and said loudly to Yuling. Sister, I think you are pretty good looking. I would like to remind you that this is not a good person, he is just a scumbag. Don't look at him being intimate with you now. If you dare to make even a small request to him, he will immediately slander you and run away. She looked confident, as if she was really the victim of Su Yi's abuse. Su Yi was not angry when she heard what she said, but was just a little curious about how she dared to say the words, I think you look okay, to Yuling with her appearance. Unfortunately, Yuling couldn't understand what she was talking about at all. Seeing her pointing at Su Yi and shouting loudly, her eyes wandered, thinking about whether this was an entanglement and whether she should take action. Fortunately, the store also noticed what was happening here, and the store manager quickly ran over and said, Do you two have something to talk about? We have a lounge in the store. If you have something to do, why not go to the lounge and talk in detail? The words are very euphemistic, but the meaning to be expressed is very clear. You can quarrel wherever you like, don't quarrel in my store, I still have business to do. Su Yi heard this and said, Sorry, I just brought my girlfriend here to buy a mobile phone. I don't know this person at all. I come to your stall. If we have anything to do, why don't we discuss it in private? However, Zhao Lulu's focus was completely different from that of normal people. She ignored the store manager's words and pointed at Su Yi. Why, do you really believe the lie that he is here to buy a mobile phone for someone else? He is such a stingy man. He was reluctant to give out a 520 red envelope during the holiday last month, but he was still willing to give a mobile phone to his girlfriend. Su Yi, who had been too lazy to talk to her at first, was really a little overwhelmed now. No, you want red envelopes during the Ghost Festival, are you going to be reincarnated? And who are you, sister? Please understand, we just met once and had dinner once, and I paid for the meal. I haven't asked you for the money for the meal, so why should I give you a red envelope? Look, he started yelling at me. This guy looks like a violent man. Zhao Lulu still had a strange angle. Su Yi, seeing his speechless look, Yuling also knew that it was time to take action. Teach her a lesson, but don't hurt her life, just use that magic. I don't know what she thought of, but Yuling, who had always been very calm, suddenly made a slightly naughty arc at the corner of her mouth. Unfortunately, no one saw this scene. Then she moved the corners of her mouth and whispered a spell. Zhao Lulu, who was still raising her head and pointing her chest out to accuse Su Yi, suddenly changed her expression. She only felt a cool air from Tianlinggai to her tailbone. The feeling that was about to come out made her feel bad, and she tried to control her sphincter to restrict it a little. But the magic from another world is something that an ordinary person like her can't handle. The next moment, there was a continuous puff sound. Under the gaze of the people eating melons around, a thick yellow soup burst out of all the restraints. Unfortunately, Zhao Lulu is still wearing a skirt today. The faces of the people watching melon eating suddenly changed, and they quickly covered their nose. I just finished my dinner and wanted to take a walk. This is too was also stunned, pulling Yuling back again and again. At the same time, he glanced at Yuling and noticed the cunning look in her eyes and the mischievous smile on her lips. He immediately guessed that this was her handiwork and asked in a low voice. Is nothing going to happen? While speaking, he glanced at Zhao Lulu again. This woman was completely stunned, but the spraying had not stopped yet. Listening to the continuous pop sound, Su Yi was worried that she might become dehydrated. No, she will have diarrhea for about 3 days and lose a few pounds, but it is not life-threatening. Then she will be weak for about 10 days, and then she will be fine, and there will be no sequelae. Well, there will be no sequelae. At most, it will just be a different planet in the future. Su Yi's mouth twitched, but he didn't sympathize with this guy at all. Don't you like to make a fool of yourself in public? Then just be conspicuous and take it for granted. As for Yu Ling, who acted out of self-defense, he certainly would not blame her. Fortunately, this store is large enough, and the internal ventilation system is fairly developed. Even if you are far away, you can't smell any smell. Su Yi didn't pay attention to Zhao Lulu, who was being carried to the bathroom by a group of clerks. He directly found a clerk from the other side, picked 2 of the latest mobile phones, paid for them directly, and then left quickly. According to Warwick's popularity on the internet, if someone pooped in their offline store, I'm afraid it will be a hot search tomorrow. He had to quickly take Yu Ling to hide. It's too abstract. Who knew that when you go out to buy a mobile phone, you will encounter such a mess? Until Su Yi finished everything and came out of the mall, he was still worried about the interesting episode just now. Looking at Yu Ling, who was sitting quietly in the passenger seat with a normal expression, he suddenly felt that this elf was not that simple. At least Yu Ling is definitely not as Buddhist and peaceful as she seems on the surface. Su Yi could clearly see the gloating look in his eyes just now after the prank was successful. On the surface she is a dignified elf princess, but deep down there is a little devil living inside, right? After thinking about it, Su Yi took a deep breath and prepared to have a good talk with her. Unexpectedly, before he opened his mouth, he heard Yu Ling say, "Sorry, I didn't control the intensity this time. Next time I encounter something similar, I'll use gentler magic." Su Yi was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, "No, I didn't mean to blame you. I want to say that this magic is very good. In the future, when you encounter such difficult but not threatening people, you can use this trick, or similar tricks." Zhao Lulu's kind of hobmeat is undoubtedly the most annoying in modern society, but also the most helpless. The key is that if you are disgusted by this kind of person, there is really nothing you can do to treat her. Call the police. Even if the police come, it won't be easy. Is it possible that people can be jailed or given administrative penalties if they are caught making loud noises in public places? Impossible. The most that can be done is to invite people to the bureau to mediate, which is of basically no use. For ordinary people, they can only hide away when they encounter such people. If they are really forced to do nothing by such people, then it will be a fight at the end. And Yu Ling's magic, which can kill people without being noticed, is very effective against this kind of hobmeat. Are you afraid if I really let you poop in public? Yu Ling was stunned for a moment. Seeing that Su Yi was hesitant to speak, she thought that Su Yi was dissatisfied with her using such bad magic. Unexpectedly, instead of being dissatisfied, he actually supported him to use this trick next time he encounters a similar situation. Yu Ling's calm eyes were vaguely excited, and she nodded quickly. "Okay, I'll listen to you." By the time the two got home, it was already past 11 o'clock in the evening. Then Su Yi discovered another thing. The place where he lives now is a rental house. 1 bedroom and 1 living room, there is no such thing as a guest bedroom. So the question is, how to sleep? Yu Ling didn't have an ID card, so he couldn't even get a room to sleep in. In desperation, Su Yi originally planned to go out and rent a room to sleep, and let her sleep at home. But Yu Ling was unwilling, saying that she was here to protect Su Yi's safety, and it was impossible for her to stay at home as a bodyguard and let her boss go out to live. After some pulling and pulling, the two magically checked into the hotel together. Suite, the kind with 2 rooms. But Yu Ling spent most of that night in Su Yi's room. Not that anything pleasant happened. The main reason is that she is very curious about mobile phones and has been pestering Su Yi to teach her how to play with mobile phones. It seems that due to becoming more and more familiar with each other, Su Yi found that Yu Ling seemed to be showing signs of releasing his nature. The image has changed from a dignified and quiet elf princess at the beginning, to a little girl with a lively personality and curious about everything. He also has a somewhat bad personality and seems to like teasing others. He didn't know what to say. So if you don't have a close relationship with some people, you really don't know how big the contrast between her front and back people is. Yu Ling pestered her and taught her how to operate her cell phone all night. In the end, Su Yi was so sleepy that he downloaded Tetris on his mobile phone and fooled the elf princess. As a result, he slept until noon the next day and found that Yu Ling was still playing Tetris on his bedside. Compared with the first time they met yesterday, Yu Ling was now wearing the loose pajamas Su Yi bought for her, lying on her stomach on the bed, with her white and tender jailer folded behind her, and she was looking at her phone attentively, with the end of the phone still the charging cable is connected. No matter how you look at her, she looks like a stay-at-home, internet-addicted girl. How can you tell she is an elf princess? When Su Yi woke up, he happened to be facing Yu Ling. As soon as he opened his eyes were drawn into the abyss in the lace pajamas. It took a while before he took a deep breath and came back to his senses. Glancing at Yu Ling, who was concentrating on playing the game and didn't seem to care that she was gone, Su Yi kindly reached out and lifted the pajama strap that had slipped from her shoulders. Mind your image. Oh, Yu Ling subconsciously turned sideways and lifted the shoulder strap. Just such a small gesture. Su Yi gasped again, then calmly pulled up the air conditioner that was kicked to the side of the bed and covered him, and then asked, "Have you been playing all night?" After hearing this, Yu Ling glanced out the window subconsciously, and then said unexpectedly, "Hey, is it already dawn? It's already noon." Su Yi was speechless. "Why don't you go back to your room and sleep? Do you know this is very dangerous? I originally planned to play for a while and then go back to sleep, but then I forgot." Yu Ling said a little embarrassed. "It doesn't matter. Our elves' schedule is different from that of you humans. We can go several days without sleeping. You are a ruthless person who bends rebar with your bare hands. Am I worried about whether you can sleep or not?" Rubbing his eyebrows, he said helplessly, "Stop playing, tidy up, and go out to do errands later." Good. Although Yu Ling is very addicted to games, she is still very obedient to Su Yi's words. Hearing this, he did not hesitate to turn off the game that had accumulated countless tens of thousands of points, stood up and stood beside the bed. Quote. Their eyes met, and after a while, Su Yi tightened the air-conditioning quilt covering her body. "Don't you need to change clothes? I don't know how to wear some of the clothes you bought for me. Let me see how you wear them first," Yu Ling said very honestly. Su Yi thought about it and felt that those clothes had zippers, buttons, and belts. It was indeed a bit embarrassing for someone who had never worn them in another world to wear them. She doesn't understand the language, so she couldn't directly ask the clerks in those stores yesterday. It's time to teach her. But just as he was about to get up, he looked at the air-conditioned quilt hanging on his body and quickly sat back on the bed. "Wait for me for a few minutes." Good. Su Yi tried to calm down and took deep breaths continuously. After a while, when he felt that he had almost calmed down, as soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Yu Ling, who was wearing pajamas that were leaking from all sides, revealing a large area of white and tender skin, and looking at him curiously. "Well, in vain. How about you wait for me outside the house?" Good. After a while. "Come on, let me teach you which clothes you don't know how to wear. It's just this weird piece of clothing that I can't put on my body." "Wait, you mean bra?" "Yes, this should be worn underneath, right? I'll take off my clothes first." No, wait a minute. Why is your nose bleeding?" Healing. Chapter 11. After getting along with each other for nearly a day, although it was a bit incomprehensible, Su Yi quickly realized a very serious matter. That is, Yu Ling doesn't seem to have the slightest defense against him, especially when it comes to issues between men and women. If she was so unprepared for everyone, Su Yi wouldn't find it strange, and would just think that she was a creature from another world that was more unrestrained. But when it comes to others, she is not like this. Yu Ling is very smart and can already understand some simple vocabulary. But every time an outsider tried to talk to her, she could clearly guess what the person meant, and she only needed to nod or shake her head to express her opinion, but she had to ask Su Yi's opinion first before giving it to the other person. Reply. There is no intention of getting to know or communicate with outsiders at all. If I had to describe it, it was probably that she seemed to regard herself as Su Yi's personal belongings. Su Yi wasn't sure why this happened, but he guessed that it had nothing to do with the trading platform, but more like some kind of rule in their world. Most likely it has something to do with the Guardian Night ceremony that looked quite similar at that time. He couldn't directly ask Yu Ling about this matter, so he planned to ask him by the way the next time he was trading with Wei Wei. It's not a bad thing anyway. A charming elf obeys your words and shows no signs of defense in front of you. He wished he could have more of this kind of good thing. Apart from the somewhat useless treatment, there is no downside at all. Putting aside some interactions with Yu Ling, Su Yi still did not forget about business. After getting up and washing up, he had a quick lunch and then took Yu Ling straight to a farm on the outskirts of Zhongcheng. Wei Wei's side is not in a hurry to get the 1,000 tons of flour now. Su Yi also plans to let these two idiots Lu Sheng and Li Wenyuan hang out for a few days, so there is no rush for the time being. But it was best to get the fruits, vegetables and meat that Wei Wei had promised to provide as soon as possible. The fruits, vegetables, meat and the 500 tons of rice provided previously were all transaction requests made by Wei Wei when the two parties met for the first time. The rice has been traded and the transaction points have been settled, but the fruits, vegetables and meat have not been delivered yet, so the transaction is not completed yet. The two did not agree on a specific time at that time. Su Yi said that it would take some time to prepare the fruits, vegetables and meat. The points of the trading platform are calculated based on the items exchanged in real time, and there is no hard and fast rule that a transaction must be completed within a certain time. It stands to reason that even if Su Yi delayed it for 10 or 8 years, he would even be regarded as a deadbeat and simply refuse to give it. Wei Wei couldn't do anything about him. But he is obviously not this kind of person. He usually keeps it in mind when he agrees to other people's things. If you don't get it done in time, you'll have something on your mind, and you'll always feel like you're not happy anywhere. I went out right now to solve this problem. Meat is easy to handle. Su Yi had a restaurant in his family when he was young. In recent years, he has gradually taken over the family business. Getting a few tons of frozen meat from his channels is a piece of cake. But it is difficult for him to produce several tons of fruits and vegetables at one time, which are difficult to preserve for a long time. After all, the restaurant is only of a small size and it is not a big hotel. However, Su Yi did get the contact information of a large farm owner in the suburbs of Zhongcheng from him. If someone recommends you, it will be easier to get things done. He had already contacted the owner of the farm last night and arranged to meet this afternoon. Yuanfang Ecological Farm is right here. After driving for nearly half an hour, Su Yi arrived at the farm located in the southeastern suburbs of Zhongcheng, not far from Dajiang. He had read the information about Yuanfang Farm before coming here. It covers an area of about 5,000 acres, where not only a variety of fruits and vegetables are grown, but also livestock and poultry such as pigs, cattle, sheep, chickens, ducks, and geese are raised. There is also a lake inside the farm, which raises various fish with high economic value. It is a very large comprehensive ecological farm. It is said that the original investment exceeded 100 million. Otherwise, his little family plans to cooperate with others to build a catering brand and open branches all over the country. It needs a stable supply, and it is impossible to establish a relationship with the owner of such a large farm. And Su Yi came here today not just for the tons of fruits and vegetables. With such a small thing, a boss with a net worth of over 100 million would not make a special trip to see him. He wanted to come and talk about the farm acquisition. Yuanfang Farm's poor management, coupled with the overall economic downturn in the past 2 years, has long been on the verge of bankruptcy. The boss had other properties, and now life was also difficult. He needed funds urgently to fill the holes elsewhere, so he came up with the idea of transferring the farm. As for why Su Yi wanted to acquire a farm, it was naturally for the transaction with Wei Wei. After some research, he found that as long as he had a farm, he could purchase all the grain, fruits, vegetables and meat that Wei Wei needed through the farm in a reasonable and compliant manner. Needless to say, fruits, vegetables and meat are the main commodities grown on farms. As for food, with a farm in hand, it is too easy to purchase large quantities of food reasonably. Can't I buy it to feed the livestock? Why do livestock eat grain instead of feed? Do you understand what ecological farming is? The high cost is my own business. I am happy to lose money. Can you control it? Isn't grain-fed beef also fed with grains? No problem at all. As for how much grain is put into the farm, why are there no chickens, ducks, cattle, and sheep fed with various grains? Don't ask. If you ask, you will get sick and die. It can be said to be a logical closed loop without any flaws. In contrast, although the food processing plants he is more familiar with can also purchase large quantities of grain, it is difficult to deal with fruits, vegetables and meat, and it is easy for people to find problems if the grain can only go in and out. When setting up a hotel or restaurant, fruits, vegetables and meat are easy to obtain, but purchasing hundreds of tons of grain at a time is difficult. Otherwise, we have to solve the problem from the source. This ecological farm is the source. Because they had been contacted in advance, as soon as Su Yi's car arrived at the door of the farm office building, a young man in a suit greeted him enthusiastically. "Is this Mr. Su? Come in quickly, Mr. Sun is already waiting for you in the office. My surname is Zhou, and I am the manager of the farm. You can just call me Xiao Zhou." It is not difficult to see from his enthusiastic attitude that the owner of Yuanfang Farm really wants to package and sell the farm as soon as possible. And this Xiao Zhou was naturally very attentive when receiving the person who was most likely his future boss. The farm's office building is not very beautiful, and the layout inside is very ordinary, but it is clean and tidy, giving people a refreshing feeling. Judging from the cleaning marks on the ground, it was obviously that it had been specially cleaned up recently. The big boss obviously wouldn't arrange this kind of thing specially, so these were obviously arranged by the little Zhou in front of him. The owner of Yuanfang Farm is Sun Wang, a middle-aged and elderly man who is nearly 60 years old but energetic. Although he is a businessman, he appears to be quite decent and meticulous in his work. After Su Yi went with the farm manager Zhou to meet Sun Wang, the two just exchanged brief greetings, and Sun Wang took him around the farm himself without saying a word. Letting people go to the farm to see what is grown and grown there will naturally be of great reference value for both parties when negotiating prices. Farms are different from places like factories in that they cannot be prepared in advance. After all, raising crops and livestock takes time, and there is no possibility of improvising in advance. It is still very useful for reference. Even if he didn't take the initiative to mention it, Su Yi would find an excuse to go to the farm and look around. After looking around, he realized that he had underestimated the farm before. The various things grown and cultivated here are themselves an extremely huge wealth. All kinds of modern agricultural facilities are beyond the imagination of ordinary people. The farm as a whole appears to be extremely advanced and well planned. In the words of manager Zhou, the farm adopts a scientific cyclic sowing plan and is currently able to produce tons of different varieties of fresh fruits and vegetables for sale on the market every day. Under this plan, as long as the farm is still operating, there will be a steady stream of crop output in the corresponding season. At that time, Su Yi half-jokingly asked manager Zhou if it was possible to expand the variety of crops grown so that the farm could continue production all year round. Manager Zhou told him quite professionally that this could be done further south, in a warmer climate. But the climate in Zhongcheng is not suitable for this. Although off-season planting is nothing compared to current agricultural technology, it is not consistent with the pure natural green ecological agricultural products that Yuanfang Farm focuses on. It's not easy to sell them once they're grown. Su Yi didn't think about how to sell the things he grew, so it was naturally not a problem for him. After knowing that it could be done, I didn't ask any more questions. After looking around, the group returned to Sun Wang's office again. It can be seen that although Sun Wang is rich, his life is relatively simple. There are no arty calligraphy and paintings in the entire office, let alone such luxurious things as mahogany desks. Simple and clean, this was Su Yi's first impression after entering this place. Sun Wang was very polite and personally made a cup of tea for Su Yi. After a few words of greeting, the two went straight to the topic. Mr. Su also inspected the farm for a while. Do you have any ideas? It's very good. It meets my requirements in all aspects. It can be seen that Mr. Sun and manager Zhou have taken good care of the farm. Su Yi took a sip of tea and gave a pertinent answer. Then about the farm transfer. Sun Wang asked eagerly, obviously eager to sell the farm in his hand. Involving the asset transfer of hundreds of millions of dollars, Su Yi definitely doesn't have that much money in his hands at the moment. But fortunately, this kind of thing cannot be settled in a day or two. What we need to talk about now is just a preliminary intention to cooperate. Mr. Sun also knows that I am not in this business, and I don't know much about your industry. How about you make an offer, Mr. Sun, and I will study it when I get back and give you a reply. Su Yi changed hands and kicked the ball back, and then added. If the price is reasonable, we can sign a contract of intent by tomorrow at the latest. I can make an initial deposit of no less than 10 million. He really didn't understand the farm thing, and there was no need to pretend that he did. After all, he is now a boss who has money in his pocket and wants to invest in something, and was introduced by another boss. It is normal to not understand technology and market conditions. As long as he has money, some professional organizations will help him evaluate the value of the farm. Sun Wang was not surprised by this answer. After thinking again and again, he tentatively said, "My initial opinion is 160 million. What does Mr. Su think?" Su Yi raised his eyebrows in surprise when he heard this. Although he is not an expert, he must have been familiar with the relevant situation before coming here. Yuanfang Farm was founded 13 years ago, with more than 100 million invested at that time. Coupled with the costs of maintenance and other aspects in recent years, the money invested in it will only be more. Of course, the farm must also be profitable, and it is impossible to make ends meet. It's just that after more than 10 years of inflation, 100 million more than 10 years ago and 100 million now are not the same concept. At that time, RMB 100 million was invested in purchasing various equipment that cannot be purchased for RMB 100 million now. And these devices are basically in good condition and usable. Coupled with land value appreciation. Even if the property rights of the farmland last for a total of 30 years, there are only 17 years left to use. Moreover, this is agricultural land, and its value is definitely different from that of commercial land. But in general, it is completely impossible to contract such a large piece of land for 17 years at the price 10 years ago. So no matter how you look at it, this is a very conscientious price. Su Yi's money came easily. Since the other party had already offered a price that he thought was very reasonable, even preferential, he didn't bother to bargain. Anyway, it's just the intention stage now. When it comes time to sign a contract and pay money, he will definitely find a professional agency to come over for investigation and evaluation. It doesn't matter if you agree now. Seeing that he agreed without even paying back the price, Sun Wang was naturally overjoyed. It happened that it was dinner time at this time, and Su Yi and Yu Ling, who had come with them, were specially invited to have a meal at the farmhouse provided by the farm. During the dinner, Su Yi proposed to purchase a batch of fruits and vegetables first, and Sun Wang naturally had no reason to refuse. Even if he asked manager Zhou to arrange for people to pick them overnight, they could deliver them to the warehouse designated by Su Yi early tomorrow morning. Of course, for this kind of purchase, money must be given first. A total of 8 tons of fruits and vegetables were purchased, all of which are seasonal products and freshly picked from this kind of ecological farm. Of course, the price is more expensive than those in ordinary vegetable markets and fruit shops. A total of just over 100,000. Sun Wang made the decision and gave him a 100,000, sign the contract on the spot and pay. Sun Wang was even happier when he saw that he was transferring money without blinking an eye. The money was transferred from a private account. These days, some big bosses who claim to be worth tens of millions or hundreds of millions may actually have higher liabilities than their net worth. If you want to buy a car, you have to use the company's account. Without going into public accounts, it's not always possible to spend over 100,000 on groceries anytime and anywhere. Unless they are really not short of money, many wealthy people will not put too much money into their personal accounts. There are some tax issues involved, and people with money in their pockets are wise to it. Over the frozen meat, Su Yu's childhood friend has already prepared 2 tons. Tomorrow, they will be delivered to a frozen warehouse he rented in advance. In addition to these 8 tons of fresh fruits and vegetables, Wei Wei was promised 10 tons. All fruits, vegetables and meat can be traded tomorrow. Fixed an issue with closing the first trade on the trading platform. A big stone fell to the ground in his heart. But tonight's business is not over yet. He had contacted Lao Lu before to trade another 20 kilograms of gold. Lao Lu also agreed, but this time, as Su Yi thought, the place agreed upon was not the business club in the city center where they met last time, but a rather remote resort in the suburbs of Zhongcheng. The amount of money involved is nominally too large, and it is unsafe in a place like the city center. What actually happened is unknown. Before, it was absolutely impossible for Su Yi to go. Of course, if he is really stupid enough to reveal that he has so much gold without any support, and if the other party is really malicious, then it doesn't really make much difference whether he goes or not. Gray industry organizations are not something he can fight against. But now it's different. With Yu Ling's personal protection, in the land of Kyushu, as long as he is not targeted by the authorities, basically no one can do anything to him. He had previously demonstrated the lethality of some modern weapons to Yu Ling through video means. After reading it, Yu listened and gave him a very conservative answer according to Su Yi's request. As long as she is here, no firearm can hurt Su Yi. Even when faced with a cannon attack with a killing radius of more than 50 meters, she was confident that she could escape with Su Yi intact. As for more powerful weapons, without corresponding video information, she had no idea. But that's enough. With her as his support, Su Yu said he had no fear of Lao Lu and the organization behind him. Of course, there is no saying that you dare not go. What's more, he also promised Sun Wang to sign a contract of intent tomorrow, and he would receive 10 million in intent money by then. Where else would he get so much money? At 10 o'clock in the evening, Su Yi, who had just finished dinner with Sun Wang, rushed to the Zhongsan Villa Resort, also located in the southern suburbs of Zhongcheng. Soon we found the place we had agreed with Lao Lu. As his old acquaintance, Lao Lu was already waiting for him at the door. After meeting, Lao Lu didn't say much, and he didn't ask much about Yu Ling, who was following behind Su Yi. There are no procedures such as body searches involved in underground transactions in those young and dangerous movies. After saying a simple hello, he took Su Yi and the two of them into an inconspicuous villa. However, when entering the door, old Lu still whispered, "The person handling your transaction is a big shot. He happened to be free today. He came to handle it after hearing about this matter. The money must be quite a lot for you. Just be careful about your attitude." Although Su Yi didn't know what kind of big shot this was, he actually asked him to pay attention to his attitude when buying his gold. But it could be seen that the person was reminding him with good intentions, so he didn't say anything more and just nodded to show that he understood. Then he carried the safe full of gold and walked into the villa with Yu Ling. Lao Lu didn't come in, so he was waiting at the door. After entering, the person leading the way was another man in a suit who was very capable and cold. He looked like he had good fighting ability. He was probably a bodyguard or something like that. Su Yi turned around and asked Yu Ling in a low voice in the language of another world, "How many people with this kind of fighting ability can you deal with at most?" After hearing this, Yu Ling glanced at the bodyguard who was leading the way, and then shook her head. Su Yi thought she didn't see the bodyguard take action, so she couldn't assess the opponent's strength and couldn't just open her mouth and come. But he didn't expect to hear Yu Ling say the next moment, "They're just ordinary people. No matter how many people come, they won't pose any threat to me. According to the division of strength in our world, my martial arts strength has reached the level of the Moon Eclipse Knight. Even in an army with strong individual strength in our world, and when there is no one of the same level as me in the opponent's army, it is easy for me to move freely among the hundreds of thousands of troops. Unless I don't want to live anymore and insist on fighting with the hundreds of thousands of troops until I die of exhaustion, otherwise the hundreds of thousands of troops can't do anything to me. Of course, I can't defeat these armies with my martial arts strength alone. But I have also practiced elf magic, and my strength has reached the level of a great magician. I can release some less powerful forbidden spells, so if there is no one of the same level as me in the opponent's army, I can also try to conquer an army of hundreds of thousands. All buried. Quote exclamation mark. Quote. Su Yu was stunned for a moment. Before, he only knew that Yu Ling should be very strong. Even in their world of extraordinary power, she could be considered a strong person. But this was the first time Yu Ling described her combat effectiveness in a more intuitive way. There are hundreds of thousands of enemies, and these hundreds of thousands of people are based on the army of another world as a template, and their individual combat effectiveness is far stronger than that of the Blue Star people. If she hadn't been bragging, then her combat power would be like a supermodel compared to Blue Star. On Blue Star's cold weapon battlefield, wouldn't it mean that one person can serve as a million divisions in the true sense? Of course, this is just a cold weapon battlefield. The army from another world is only individually stronger than the Blue Star people. How its specific combat effectiveness compares with Blue Star's modern army remains to be discussed. After all, the development routes are different. And Blue Star has a real killer weapon like mushroom eggs. When Su Yi had nothing to do last night, in order to understand which of the two worlds' peak powers was stronger and which was weaker, Su Yi even dug out various data on the Tsar's hydrogen bomb and showed it to Yu Ling. After reading it, Yu Ling said it was outrageous. In her words, this thing is probably the god of martial arts and magic in their world who have practiced martial arts and magic to the extreme, and they will fall asleep on the spot after being hit by it. And the forbidden spell she was talking about was actually a kind of large-scale destructive magic. The coverage radius of the smaller ones is estimated to be only a few hundred or even kilometers, while the powerful ones can have a killing radius of several kilometers or even 10 kilometers. In fact, it is not as good as the common megaton nuclear bombs on Blue Star. Moreover, as long as there is a need on Blue Star, nuclear bombs can be manufactured indefinitely on the assembly line. But their magicians who can release forbidden spells are not produced on the assembly line, and there are only so many. So comparing the two, Su Yi came to a conclusion that sounded a bit ridiculous. That is, if the two worlds were to fight with real swords and guns, the awesome extraordinary beings in their world would probably not be able to defeat the ordinary humans who have been fighting internal wars for thousands of years on Blue Star and have mastered the technology of mutual destruction. Of course, that is the overall combat effectiveness comparison between the two worlds. In the current situation, individual strength is obviously more important to Su Yi. And Yu Ling is this individual with tremendous combat power, which directly makes Su Yi feel safe. The voices of the two people talking were confused by Yu Ling using a special magic. Outsiders could only hear what they were muttering, but they couldn't hear the content at all. Naturally, it is impossible to discover that this is a completely new language. The bodyguard who led the way also appeared to be quite professional. As there was no rule of silence in the villa, he ignored the communication between the two and just led the way, playing the role of a toolman perfectly. It's said to be a villa, but actually it's a huge retro-style house inside. The bodyguard led the two of them across the covered bridge with carved beams and painted buildings, and came to a very exquisite garden. Although the garden is not big, it is well equipped. There is no shortage of small bridges, flowing water, rockery and stone walls, and exotic flowers and plants. There is also a pavilion in the middle. In the pavilion, a man wearing a simple t-shirt and shorts cuddles up with a very cute little girl and feeds the koi. From time to time, the little girl's silvery laughter could be heard in the garden. If he ignored that what he came here to do was neither black nor white, Su Yi felt that the scene in front of him was quite healing. But at this moment, she suddenly felt Yu Ling beside her suddenly take the initiative to hold his hand, squeezed it slightly, and at the same time, Yu Ling's voice came to her ears. That little girl is sick and dying. Su Yi was stunned for a moment and subconsciously looked back at Yu Ling. Their eyes met. Yu Ling blinked and said firmly, "Really, she can live for a month at most." Su Yi. He looked back not because he suspected that Yu Ling had lied to him when he said that the little girl was going to die. Rather, I felt that something like this was said in such a calm tone by such a beautiful elf who was rumored to be very kind and gentle. It just felt a little inconsistent with the style of the painting. But thinking about it carefully, it seems that these are the stereotypes of elves that he got from various entertainment works of Blue Star. The author himself has never seen elves, so how does he know what the personalities of elves in other worlds are like? Looking back, Su Yu saw that the man seemed to be accompanying the little girl and ignored him, so Su Yu turned to ask, "How did you tell?" "We elves are relatively sensitive to the breath of life. Creatures that are about to end their lives will emit a breath of death. Any elf can see it at a glance," Yu Ling said matter-of-factly. "We are close to nature and revere life. Although we are not vegetarians like you said, the animals and plants we eat are basically about to die. This is also one of the ways we find food." Food. Su Yu's eyes twitched and he subconsciously glanced at the little girl. "We don't eat intelligent beings." Yu Ling sighed helplessly. After spending a day together, she finally discovered it. The person he swore to protect was good in all aspects, but his mind seemed a bit big and he would always think of some inexplicable things. "Oh, it's okay then," Su Yu said again. "So this little girl is dead. Under normal circumstances, he should be dead, but if you or I want to save her, she can be saved." Yu Ling said seriously. "You or me?" Su Yu asked doubtfully. "You know magic, so I can understand if you can save her, but I don't know how can I save her?" "Water of life." Yu Ling seemed a little surprised. Princess Wei Wei gave you a bottle of water of life as a trade, right? Didn't she tell you about the efficacy of water of life? In her case, a few drops can help her live 10 more years. 1 cup of the small cup you used to drink when we were having dinner should be able to make her recover, and she will be healthier than anyone else in her life. You will get sick, and you will be fine if you live to be 150 years old. Etc. Su Yu was suddenly confused. If he remembered correctly, the water of life was used to exchange for the 10 tons of fruits, vegetables and meat, right? He spent a total of more than 100,000 on purchasing those things. Now tell me, I spent more than 100,000 yuan to buy more than 500 milliliters of stuff, and it still has this effect. Let's not talk about curing diseases. Just 1 cup can make a person live to 150 years old. If he wants to sell it, this small bottle will make him the richest man in minutes. Those rich people who are afraid of death may not even blink an eye if they spend tens of billions a cup just to live for a few more decades. If you are so awesome, you should have told me earlier. Why would I sell gold? This thing is much more valuable than gold. When the trading platform introduces the water of life, it only says that it can cure all diseases, prolong life, enhance physical fitness, and that long-term drinking can promote the evolution of the human body, but there is no specific effect. Moreover, it was so easy to get this thing that Su Yi didn't pay much attention to it and only thought about finding an opportunity to implement the effect. When he got busy recently, he forgot about it. Naturally, I didn't expect to ask Yu Ling. After hearing Yu Ling's words, he immediately realized that this was the most valuable thing currently appearing in that other world. Although the two people's whispers were deliberately lowered, they were so close that they could still be heard in the pavilion. While having fun, the little girl noticed 2 strangers coming and said very sensibly, "Dad, a guest is coming, you go and do your work first. Ying Ying needs to go to bed too. Okay, Ying Ying, go and wash up first. Dad will tell you a story later." The man gently rubbed the little girl's head. After the woman dressed as a servant took the girl away, the man turned back to look at Su Yi and the two. When he glanced at Yu Ling, there was a hint of surprise in his eyes that was difficult to conceal. But it was just a glance. He quickly focused on Su Yi and said with interest, "Are you a doctor?" Su Yi never expected that he would ask such a strange question when he first came up, and said in surprise, "Why do you ask that? When you looked at Ying Ying just now, there was obviously a look of pity and sympathy in your eyes. You must have seen that she was in poor health, right? Not only was he in poor physical condition, he was about to die." Su Yi complained in his heart, but his mind was moving very quickly and he said without changing his expression, "My family has been practicing traditional Chinese medicine for generations. Although I didn't learn much from me, I still know a little bit about it. A family of traditional Chinese medicine that treats illnesses and saves lives, no wonder they have so much gold." The man seemed to mean something. But then he put aside the gold matter, and the calm and indifferent look on the little girl's face after she left showed a few other emotions. "What do you think of Ying Ying's condition? Don't worry, we follow the rules and there is no such thing as hiding a disease or avoiding medical treatment." His tone seemed nonchalant, as if he was talking about a trivial matter. But Su Yi could clearly feel that there seemed to be some hope in his eyes. So he said, "I can live for a month at most." After thinking for a while, he added, "On the premise of maintaining the status quo and doing nothing." He only knew that the little girl was about to die, but he didn't know what kind of disease she had or what kind of treatment she usually received. If you get cancer and you have to undergo chemotherapy from time to time, God knows if you can survive more than a month. Snap. The man who was quite casual a second ago and didn't seem too concerned about it suddenly stood up. The mobile phone placed in front of him fell to the ground and fell directly into the fish pond without caring. He stared at Su Yi. "Are you really a capable inheritor of traditional Chinese medicine? Can cancer be cured?" That look was like a drowning person grabbing the last thing he could hold on to. As for whether this thing was hemp rope or straw, he could no longer care. However, Su Yi pointed to the suitcase in Yu Ling's hand and said, "I'm here to do business. There's gold in this, a total of 47 kilograms. Would you like the boss to inspect the goods first?" To be honest, the guy in front of him seemed very rude to Su Yi. It was clear that he had made an appointment with Lao Lu to arrive at this time, but he neither came early nor late. But after arriving, I watched this guy stay with his daughter for more than 10 minutes. He and Yu Ling stood nearby, as humble as servants in other people's homes. If Yu Ling hadn't said that the little girl was about to die, and Su Yi could barely understand his behavior of leaving his guests aside to accompany his daughter, he would have taken Yu Ling away long ago. After all, he is here to do business, not to ask for help. But now that the offensive and defensive momentum is different, it is people's turn to beg him. Not to mention too much, Su Yi still wanted an apology. The man glanced at the box in Yu Ling's hand. He was surprised that such a beautiful woman could carry dozens of kilograms of weight for so long. At the same time, he quickly reacted and realized that his previous behavior was inappropriate. He stood up quickly, stretched out his hand and said, "This is Mr. Su, I am Shenming Shu. I'm really sorry. I missed my appointment tonight, but my little girl's body is really, sigh. Anyway, it's all my fault. To show my sincerity, I will buy this gold according to the current gold price on the market. There is no need to inspect it. You give me an account and I will transfer the money now." Su Yi reached out and shook his hand, then smiled and said, "That's not necessary. In business, the goods that should be inspected still need to be inspected." The goods were inspected, but he bought them at market price, so Su Yi accepted them. After all, that's a price difference of hundreds of dollars per gram. "Okay, let's test it." Shenming Shu didn't show any pretense and readily agreed. After a while, someone came to the garden carrying various equipment to test the purity of the gold on the spot. What Su Yi told Lao Lu was to sell 20 kilograms of gold. However, after arriving at the scene and seeing the situation in front of him, he changed his mind and took out all the gold in the storage space. "Anyway, if you keep it, you won't be able to give birth to cubs. Shenming Shu in front of you looks like a big shot, and he probably won't be unable to take it just because he got a little more gold. With Yu Ling here, it would not be a problem to put the gold into the suitcase without disturbing others." Taking advantage of the opportunity to inspect the gold, Shenming Shu took the initiative to talk to Su Yi. This man has a very high emotional intelligence. He quickly resolved the embarrassment of leaving the two of them aside just now, and his attitude of admitting his mistake was also very sincere. This was originally a trivial matter, and there was indeed a reason for it, so Su Yi didn't hold on to it all the time. The two soon chatted happily. Then, as expected, the topic turned back to the little girl's condition. Su Yi finally knew what disease she had: congenital leukemia. Although he is not a real doctor, he has heard about this disease to some extent. Su Yi was a little curious just now. What kind of disease did this little girl have that even money couldn't cure? This finally cleared up his doubts. "Mr. Su, do you think this disease can be cured?" Shenming Shu, who felt that he was almost done, finally carefully asked what he really cared about. It's difficult. Su Yi shook his head and sighed. But Shenming Shu not only did not feel discouraged when he heard this, but his eyes lit up. "It's difficult, not impossible to cure." He didn't say anything pretentious like, "I have a lot of money and power. If you have any difficulties, just tell me." But he said very sincerely, "Mr. Su, Yingying's mother and I have known each other since childhood, grew up together, and finally got married. However, my lover contracted the root cause of the disease when Yingying was born, and died of the disease within a year. Yingying is not only a daughter and a descendant to me, but also the last spiritual sustenance for the love of my life. So, no matter what the price is, as long as I can do it, I will never refuse." You see, this is called high emotional intelligence. Su Yi was very satisfied with his attitude. It was a bit too vulgar to directly withdraw money. He thought for a while and then euphemistically expressed that he went to Yuanfang Farm today. He lamented that the current work process was cumbersome and complicated, but he wanted the farm to have its own uses. If he could quickly just do it. After Shenming Shu heard about it, he didn't hesitate at all and took over the matter directly, saying that he would handle it and it would be done for Su Yi tomorrow. Not a single word about money was mentioned the whole time. Obviously, he plans to pay the 160 million transfer fee required for the farm itself. With someone so open-minded, Su Yi naturally couldn't be stingy. He immediately said that he could go and see the little girl named Shen Yingying now. This is exactly what Shen Mingshu wants, and of course he will not stand in the way. To say that he really believed that Su Yi could cure this incurable disease would be nonsense. He did this just because his daughter's time was short and a dead horse was treated as a live horse doctor. Of course, a random person would certainly not be able to deceive him. People like Shen Mingshu can tell whether a person is really capable or just a bluff just through communication. And there were other reasons why he was willing to give Su Yi such an opportunity, even at the cost of hundreds of millions of dollars in compensation. That is, few people know about Shen Yingying's condition. Su Yi, an outsider, can see Shen Yingying's physical condition at a glance, and even guess how much time she has left, which shows that he is not simple. The group of people soon arrived at the door of a room on the second floor of the villa. Before the door opened, Su Yi said, "Mr. Shen, I didn't prepare anything to treat the disease before I came here today, but I have a set of massage techniques that can alleviate Miss Shen's condition to a certain extent. You can take her to the hospital for a checkup tomorrow to see the specific effects. During the treatment process, except for me and my assistant, it is best for others to stay outside and not come in. I wonder if Mr. Shen can accept this." Shen Mingwen opened his mouth, hesitated for a moment and then nodded decisively. "Can." With that said, he knocked on the door. When the nurse who took care of Shen Yingying came out, Su Yi took Yuling into this exquisite pink girl-style room. Shen Mingwen, who was outside, looked at the slowly closing bedroom door, with a flash of light in his eyes, and glanced at a middle-aged man in black behind him. The middle-aged man nodded, and soon many capable bodyguards appeared inside and outside the villa. Shen Mingwen was doing half black and half white things, so naturally there were many enemies outside. But it was basically impossible for these enemies to know that his daughter was seriously ill. Secondly, people who can make enemies with him are not idiots. Without knowing how deeply Shen Mingwen feels about his daughter, no one would think that a person like him would send someone to kidnap his daughter just for the sake of a daughter. Except for making him mad, it has no effect. This is the reason why Shen Mingwen agreed to let Su Yi and his daughter be alone. However, I have a bottom line in my heart, but people are the most unpredictable things in the world. Just in case, he specially mobilized manpower to come over. Once something unexpected happens to Shen Yingying, he will definitely not let Su Yi and two people leave. Although some words were not said out loud, everyone knew it. There are a lot of people outside, probably 50 or 60. Some of them have weapons on them, which should be the kind of pistols you showed me in the video. In the girlish little room, Yu Ling said calmly. "It's okay. This is my pet peeve after all. It's normal to be cautious. Don't worry about it." Su Yi shook his head and then said, "Cast the spell." He specifically asked Yu Ling before if her healing technique could temporarily alleviate Yingying's condition. The answer is naturally yes. Even with Yu Ling's strength, even without using the water of life, using an advanced healing magic from the elves was enough to make this little girl recover. But the things promised are still just words. Naturally, Su Yi would not cure his illness right now. That's why I said tonight can only alleviate the condition but not cure it. When all the benefits are received, it will be time to really treat this little girl. Yu Ling naturally would not shirk Su Yi's request. After receiving the clear instructions, he immediately chanted a spell softly. Soon, a green halo floated out from her palm and fell on Shen Yingying, who was already asleep. The little girl's brows, which had been frowning in her sleep due to physical discomfort, immediately relaxed the moment the healing magic fell on her. Obviously much more comfortable. Is this good? After waiting for a long time, Su Yi didn't see any other subsequent actions from Yu Ling, so he couldn't help but ask. Okay. Yu Ling nodded affirmatively. If she could only live for a month at most before this, then even if we don't care about her now, she can live for at least half a year. Awesome. Su Yi did not hesitate to praise him. No matter how many times I see it, seeing this extraordinary power in the hands of life is shocking enough. With a single thought, a dying person can be brought back to life. This kind of power only existed in people's imagination in the past. But now, through the trading platform, all of this is within reach of Su Yi. In order not to make Shen Mingwen suspicious, Su Yi and Yu Ling stayed in the little girl's room for almost half an hour before opening the door. As soon as the door opened, Shen Mingwen came over and said eagerly, "How's it going? Fortunately, I did not disgrace my life." Su Yi smiled and said, "Although this cannot cure Miss Shen's condition, it can at least make her feel much better. It is very painful for patients who are still undergoing treatment for terminal cancer. Without seeking to cure the disease, just being able to do this is a great kindness to many patients and their relatives." Shen Mingwen thanked him repeatedly, and invited Su Yi and 2 people to spend the night here on the grounds that it was getting late. Su Yi knew what he meant, so he naturally didn't refuse. This kind of wealthy family pays attention to a rigorous approach in handling affairs, but it is not like in some TV dramas or novels, where a man and a woman in an ambiguous period go to live in a strange place. At night, the host assumes that they are a couple and only arranges a room. The Shen family members asked Su Yi tactfully before taking them to 2 adjacent guest rooms. Yu Ling played another all-night game. But this time I played Xiaoxiaolei. Su Yi slept as usual and didn't get up until noon the next day. As a result, after washing up, I went out and saw Shen Mingwen and Shen Yingying waiting at the door. As soon as he saw him coming out, Shen Mingwen quickly stood up and said to the little girl, "Quick, thank you uncle." "Thank you, uncle." The childish voice sounded along with the ignorant children's voice. Su Yi, who had just woken up and was still a little confused, came back to his senses. He tapped Shen Yingying's little face carefully. "Compared to last night when I was visibly haggard, I do look a lot more rosy today." Yu Ling's healing technique still has something to offer. Shen Mingwen brought his daughter here to wait for Su Yi, seemingly just to thank him. After thanking him, he asked someone to take his daughter away, and then said very sincerely, "A professional medical team has examined Yingying in the morning. The test results shocked the attending physician. Although the cancer cells in Yingying's body have not been eradicated, they have been reduced a lot, and normal cells have not been affected, which is completely different from the effect of chemotherapy. The doctor said that he has never seen this situation. Mr. Su, to be honest, I really didn't expect you to be able to achieve this level. In my opinion, it is enough to make Yingying reduce some pain, which is enough to be worthy of the reward I paid you. Even if it cannot be completely cured, I won't trouble you again. So, I want you to tell the truth, whether Yingying's disease can be completely cured." To put it bluntly, he asked Su Yi to give it a try because of his mentality of treating a dead horse as a live horse doctor. Until now, he still can't believe that the young man in front of him can actually treat cancer better than doctors with the blessing of modern technology. In fact, the attending doctor said something in the morning that he did not tell Su Yi. That is, with Shen Yingying's current condition, it is not even considered to be in the late stage of cancer. At most, it can only be considered to be in the early to mid stage. If a suitable bone marrow transplant can be found, there is great hope for a cure. For Shen Mingwen, as long as there is hope for a cure, finding a suitable bone marrow is not a big problem. However, this treatment method will definitely be accompanied by many sequelae in the later stage. After seeing Su Yi's magical methods, he naturally wanted better ones. Without any hesitation, Su Yi nodded and gave Shen Mingwen the answer he wanted. Shen Mingwen didn't ask any more questions. After taking a deep breath, he handed an information bag placed aside to Su Yi. "Mr. Su, the matter has been taken care of for you. Yuanfang Farm and 6 other large farms around Yuanfang Farm, with a total of 17,000 acres of land, have been integrated into one super large farm. Of course, to the outside world, this is generally called an agricultural demonstration area, but there is essentially no difference. This farm is now in your name. It has not been named yet. I have found a temporary manager for you and cleared the procedural issues for you. If you have any favorite company name, just give the manager a call." "That's fine, the phone number is also in the file. In addition, I also registered a wholly owned agricultural product operating company in your name. You can also ask the manager to change your name when the time comes. The 47 kilograms of gold you gave me last night totaled 25.85 million yuan at the current market price. I decided to give you a total of 30 million yuan. All of it has been credited to this company's account. You can access it at any time, the tax has been paid." As he spoke, he took a deep breath. If Mr. Su can really cure Yingying's disease, I will pay 500 million to the company account to express my gratitude. In addition, I personally, and the entire Shen family, owe you a big favor. Of course, even if it can't be cured, what I said before will stand and I will never cause trouble to you. When Su Yi walked out of the Shen family villa with the document bag, he was still a little confused. To be honest, when he came here last night, he really only planned to sell the gold for money, and then use the exchange money to pay the deposit for Yuanfeng Farm, and at the same time purchase grain from the food processing factory and sell it to another world. More gold for more money. He never expected that in just one night, he would almost achieve financial freedom and no longer need to worry about money. There are even farms that have gone to great lengths to acquire bulk grain commodities in order to legally obtain them. And it is not just a large farm like Yuanfeng Farm, but a behemoth that is several times the size of Yuanfeng Farm. Sure enough, the plan simply couldn't keep up with the changes. When you have some means of production that no one else has, you can earn wealth faster than ordinary people imagine. Su Yi was just an ordinary person before, and he never thought that something that could cure diseases could be so profitable. I'm still thinking about how to tinker with that bit of gold. Of course, the most important thing is to see who is being treated. That is to say, only a rich girl like Shen Yingying, with a father who is not short of money, can afford such a price. For an ordinary person, if cancer treatment really costs so much money, I'm afraid they would have no choice but to end their own lives. Su Yi had no other choice but to lament that he was the same person but had different fates. There are more people suffering from cancer in the world, and every family of a cancer patient has a history of blood and tears. The water of life from another world is not unlimited, and the magic power of Yu Ling, an elf who can perform healing spells, is also limited. He couldn't save everyone. Among the limited number of people who can be saved, he will naturally save whoever pays the highest price. He is a common man, greedy for money and lustful. There is no great soul that is free from vulgar taste, and the wealth and power in his hands are far from being able to benefit the world. Just make money and that's it. Then, now it's time to think about how to spend the money. Looking at the 30 million lying in the account, Su Yi felt that he needed to spend a lot of money. In fact, the operation of the farm does not cost much. After Shen Mingwen integrated it for him, there was already more than 60 million in the farm account, and there were also a large number of mature agricultural products that could be sold at any time to repay the capital. He can use the 30 million directly for himself now, without thinking about leaving it to run the farm. Speaking of which, we are now considered to be worth hundreds of millions. It is not appropriate to still live in a rental house. Let's buy a house first. Su Yi made a decision quickly and drove straight to a famous villa area in the southern suburbs of Zhongcheng. Lu Sheng has been in a bad mood recently. Since returning to China, he has always felt that his luck has not been good. I finally found a good and lucrative job in the factory relying on my brother-in-law's relationship, but I didn't expect that as soon as I took the job, I made a mistake and caused the factory to lose hundreds of thousands. If there wasn't someone under his command who could take the blame, his brother-in-law Li Wenyuan would have no choice but to let him leave the factory this time. But here comes the problem. There are only 2 or 3 big cats and kittens in the purchasing department, and all previous matters were basically handled by Su Yi. But recently, in order to wipe his butt, Su Yi heard that he was busy running around every day and had no time to deal with the work in the factory. So much so that the procurement work fell on him. What the hell? He studied in a dawdling Shuoshuo abroad, how could he know about such serious frontline work? It can be said that he has been very busy these days. He has no idea which store's goods are good but too expensive, and which store's goods are cheap and affordable. He was even more glaring at what money could and couldn't be charged. Which supplier gives him the most gifts, he will purchase goods from that supplier. After working for less than a week, complaints from the frontline production department drifted into the boss's office like snowflakes. For this, he was often scolded by his boss and brother-in-law Li Wenyuan. This is just at work. Life is also a mess. His fiancée, who had been dating for 7 or 8 years and was about to get married, clamored for him to sell the urban wedding house his parents bought for him and buy a new house in the suburbs. He felt that this woman was probably out of her mind. But he couldn't defeat the other party. Just now, he received a call from his fiancée, asking him to check out the house. Good guy. When I looked at the address, it turned out to be the famous Zhongwan Villa area in Zhongcheng. The houses in this place cost tens of millions for the first time, and he would never be able to afford them. He felt aggrieved when he thought that he would have to beg his fiancée in a low voice not to be angry and then give her a cake to buy in a few years. But when people asked him to go look at the house, it was just for a look, and it would be inappropriate for him not to go. Otherwise, his fiancée may be labeled as not enterprising again, and he can't afford to offend her. Oh, it's so difficult. While sighing, Lu Sheng drove the car to pick up the person. Soon I met my fiancée who had just had her hair done at a barber shop. Looking at my fiancée's face, which is more than 8 points even if she wears a little makeup, she is more beautiful than ordinary celebrities and models. The resentment in his heart suddenly dissipated. His wife is so beautiful, what's wrong with asking for something? It's him who should work hard. Thinking of this, a smile immediately appeared on his face, and he mysteriously said to his fiancée, "Ling Ling, guess what good thing happened to me today?" Quote. The woman in the passenger seat lit up and said tentatively, "As another supplier giving you a big gift." Quote. The embarrassment on Lu Sheng's face flashed away, and he shook his head and said, "Guess again. Is it possible that your company pays wages?" Lu Sheng managed to control his expression, then looked at his fiancée and said affectionately, "No, I just saw you again, Ling Ling. Every time I see you, it's the best thing in my life." Quote. The corner of the woman's mouth twitched and she looked out the window with a look of disgust. "Boring. Let's go and see the house. I've already contacted you." Lu Sheng didn't pay attention to his fiancée's disgusted expression. He knew very well that his unmarried wife was very talkative. "I said it was boring, but I couldn't tell how happy I felt at the moment." After saying the earthy love words, Lu Sheng was in a good mood and drove straight to the Zhongwan Villa area. It's not the morning and evening rush hour, and there's no traffic jam on the road. The two of them arrived outside the villa area in less than half an hour, and the salesperson who had already contacted them was waiting at the entrance of the sales department. When Lu Sheng's car was parked, a doorman even came to help him open the door. This kind of treatment made Lu Sheng couldn't help but sigh in his heart. It is indeed a high-end villa area, and the service is considerate. If he hadn't been short of money, he would have built a villa in this villa area just for this service. But the next moment, when he saw the person getting out of the broken car in the parking space next door, he couldn't help but be stunned. Su Yi. As soon as he got off the car, Su Yi heard someone calling him. Looking around, he saw the unfortunate kid Lu Sheng. "I didn't expect to meet this guy even when I came to see a house." Su Yi was speechless and didn't want to talk to him at all. However, Lu Sheng's fiancée was right next to him, and he was at his strongest just now. When he called Su Yi just now, he just wanted to let his fiancée know his social status. But he didn't expect Su Yi to ignore him directly. This made him a little anxious for a moment, and he walked over in a few steps and said, "Wait, Su Yi, aren't you supposed to be talking to your customers about purchasing that batch of grain now? Why are you here?" As he spoke, he did not forget to say to his fiancée behind him, "This is the subordinate in our department I told you about." Su Yi sighed and glanced at the sand sculpture helplessly. "Xiao Lu, it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If I remember correctly, it's still working time, right? You can show up here, why can't I?" Xiao Lu. Hearing this title from Su Yi again, and in front of his fiancée, Lu Sheng's face turned dark. On weekdays, he often brags to his fiancée about his status in the factory, and his subordinates will respectfully call him Director Lu when they see him. What's the difference between Su Yi's, little Lu, and pulling off his underwear in public? Xiao Lu, can you call me Xiao Lu?" Lu Sheng said, squeezing his neck. "I won't argue with you if you were rude before. This time you are so innocent. Do you still want to do it? Would I still be here if I wanted to do this?" Su Yi glanced at him in surprise. "Idiot." With that said, he turned around and walked towards the sales department. On the side, Yu Ling's eyes lingered between Lu Sheng and Lu Sheng for a while. Seeing that Su Yi was about to leave, she quickly followed. But this time, He learned a trick from Lu Sheng's fiancée and took the initiative to reach out and hold Su Yi's arm. But she never thought that she was much richer than Lu Sheng's fiancé, whose face was covered and he couldn't tell the difference between men and women. Su Yi was caught off guard by the sudden soft touch on his arm. But in public, he couldn't be pushed away by other girls, so he could only lean into her ear and whisper. "Well, actually you don't need to hug me so tightly." Yu Ling blinked and didn't understand why he couldn't hold her so tightly, but he still relaxed a little as he was told. The almost touching feeling dissipated a little, and Su Yi also breathed a sigh of relief. He quickly took a few deep breaths to cool down his blood that was almost boiling. Only then did Lu Sheng, who was behind him, notice that the female companion next to Su Yi was so beautiful. Not only was she beautiful, but she also had an amazing figure. The fiancé next to him, who had always been as beautiful as a fairy in his eyes, suddenly didn't seem so fragrant at this moment. Of course, there are many beautiful women in the world. It's not like Lu Sheng would change his mind when he sees a woman who is prettier than his fiancé. The main thing is that this beautiful woman is holding Su Yi's arm now. How could this stinky loser find such a beautiful girlfriend? Lu Sheng's actions were all seen by his fiancé beside him, especially the scene where he first looked at Yu Ling and then turned to look at his fiancé, which clearly exposed the contrast between the two in his heart. Although many women have a kind of self-confidence in their appearance and feel that they must be more beautiful than others. But that's no matter who the score is compared to. In front of Yu Ling, even if his fiancée is usually confident about her appearance, she will inevitably become shabby now. And I happened to meet Lu Sheng, my boyfriend, who looked at the two of them with contrasting eyes. Suddenly he became angry. He threw Lu Sheng away and walked to the sales department without saying a word. Only then did Lu Sheng react. He quickly ran after him and apologized humbly. Finally he agreed to spend 20,000 to give her a new style bag, and the matter was over, and his fiancée finally agreed to accompany him to look at the house. So the woman's original request to see the house naturally turned into Lu Sheng begging his fiancée to see the house. He had a vague feeling that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. I was even a little lucky that my fiancée was generous. Although she spent some money, she was able to get her settled quickly. "Handsome beauty, do you want to come and see the house?" As soon as he entered the sales department, a beautiful saleswoman took the initiative to greet him. Su Yi nodded and said, "Is there an existing house? It's the kind that's been renovated and ready to move in." "Hello, yes, you two, please sit over here." The salesperson's eyes suddenly lit up and he quickly led the two of them to the rest area and asked as they walked, "Do you want to buy or rent? The economy is not good, and houses are naturally not so easy to sell. Naturally, they also have rental services here. Buy a house. So what are your requirements for the house? For example, in terms of environment and decoration?" The salesperson asked more carefully, and Su Yi answered them one by one. At the end of the question, the salesperson finally asked the most important question. "What's your approximate budget range?" "Within 30 million. Su Yi thought about the savings in his pocket and replied, "If there is a very suitable house, then it is not impossible to go higher." The salesman's eyes suddenly lit up. "At this price, there are a lot of houses to choose from. We have several houses here that perfectly meet your needs." With that said, he pulled out a large booklet, which contained some pictures of the villa's floor plan, location and surrounding environment. After some further selection, we finally selected 2 apartments. The salesperson said that the keys are at the sales department and you can view them now. Of course Su Yi would not refuse. However, as luck would have it, just as he was getting ready to set off in the sales department's sightseeing car, Lu Sheng and his wife appeared again. They were led to see the house by another salesperson, and they happened to be looking at the same house as Su Yi. However, these salespeople have been in this business for a long time and are obviously smart people. You can guess who is here to buy a house and who is here just to look at it, just from their conversation and facial expressions. The female saleswoman who was taking Su Yi and the others saw this and was afraid that Su Yi would be worried that someone would rob the apartment, so she found an opportunity and whispered, "Don't worry, boss, my colleague said these 2 people should just go and have a look and not buy. And we are mainly looking at the external environment of the villa. The interior of this kind of finely decorated villa is generally not allowed to be seen without signing a contract of intent. If you want to see the decoration style, you mainly look at the model room. You don't have to worry about the inside of the house before you buy it. It has been visited by various people, and we will pay special attention to this. Of course, Su Yi didn't need her to remind her. The villas here easily cost tens of millions. Not to mention Lu Sheng, even if his brother-in-law Li Wenyuan, the owner of a grain processing factory, came here, he would have to think carefully about buying one. Having a net worth of tens of millions and spending tens of millions in cash are not the same thing. However, the rules for viewing houses in this villa area made him feel very comfortable. After all, he really wanted to buy it, and naturally he didn't want other people to come in and look at his house before he bought it. I can only say that their service is indeed worthy of the price. There are several rows of sightseeing cars. Su Yi sat in the front row with their salesperson. Lu Sheng and his wife were sitting in the last row. Although they hate each other, they don't always start swearing or fighting when they meet each other these days. At this time, Lu Sheng was also in the back row asking Su Yi what they were here for, and the salesman who brought him here was honest and answered honestly. My colleagues said they were here to buy a house and they had chosen two houses. One was the villa by the lake that we were going to look at later with a good view, and the other was closer to the entrance of the villa area, which was more convenient. Quote, I guess I'll sign the contract after I finish reading it. Sign the contract, Lu Sheng sneered when he heard this. Brother, you are too honest. You can tell at a glance that this guy is just here to see the world. Not to mention buying a house here, he probably doesn't have enough money to pay the deposit. Look at his Taobao-like outfit, does he look like someone who can afford a villa? I have been in the sales business for many years, and I can still tell the difference between those who are serious about buying a house and those who are just here to take a look. If he really relied on his clothes to judge whether a customer could afford a house, he would have been unemployed a long time ago. Take the two couples in front of me as an example. Although the handsome couple in front were wearing simpler clothes, the girl was so beautiful and had such an outstanding temperament that one could tell at a glance that she could not be an ordinary person. Of course, a man with such a beautiful female companion cannot be ordinary. The latter team is different. Although they are all wearing big name brands, they are actually affordable models, and the prices are actually not that expensive. At most, the LV bags carried by women are more valuable. On the contrary, this kind of person is more like a person who has no money but pretends to be fat and insists on buying some luxury goods on himself. For discerning salespeople, there is actually no suspense as to which of the two groups of people is more likely to buy a house after viewing it. However, they are customers after all. Although they are not here to buy a house, due to professionalism, the salesperson cannot directly refute them, so he can only smile and say nothing. But he didn't say anything. Lu Sheng, who was anxious to regain some face in front of his fiancée, refused to comply. He quickly said, Don't believe it, I know this guy. He's just a small manager in charge of purchasing in my brother-in-law's factory. If he really had money to buy a house here, how could he go to work in a factory? When the salesperson heard this, he really couldn't help it. He thought that Lu Sheng was not here to buy a house anyway. Even if he complained, he would probably not be punished, so he said calmly. In fact, sometimes work doesn't mean much. We received a customer before. He usually sells fish in the vegetable market not far from the community. Many people nearby know him. When he came to see a house with us, he didn't even have time to change his clothes. He was wearing blue overalls that were dirty and smelled like fish. At that time, there was a person here who looked down on others, thinking that he was dressed in ordinary clothes and his usual job was selling fish, so he thought that this customer was here to join in the fun. In addition, it was a busy day, so he was very perfunctory when receiving customers. Quote, I never expected that the owner of a fish seller owns an office building with more than 20 floors. He usually only sells fish because he likes fishing but doesn't like eating fish. At first, he sold it piecemeal, and then he sold it piecemeal. There were so many repeat customers that he just started selling fish every morning. The boss spent more than 60 million in full to buy the second building in our villa area, and complained to the salesperson who received him. The final result was naturally that the salesperson was fired, and the boss happily took down building number 2 and planned to use it as a wedding room for his son in the future. I look down on people because they think they dress normally and do ordinary work. For some reason, Lu Sheng always felt that the sales story was made up on the fly, just to scold him for looking down on others. But it was hard for him to attack directly, and they didn't call him names and scold him. Moreover, he was also afraid that a serious quarrel would disrupt the house viewing and make his fiancée unhappy. So even though I was unhappy, I could only mutter, "Just wait and see, he will definitely not buy it," and ended the topic. The salespeople around him were disapproving. Regardless of whether they buy a house or not, customers like Su Yi are much more comfortable to receive than customers like Lu Sheng. At least when the salesperson introduced the house to Su Yi listened carefully. When he introduced Lu Sheng looked around and didn't even listen to a word, which was very disrespectful. Arrive. Not long after the sightseeing car walked through the huge villa area, it arrived in front of a 4-story single-family villa. I have to say that the scenery around the villa is very good, and the distance between each building is more than 100 meters. Across the road from the door is a lake connected to the river. The water is crystal clear and has obviously been specially treated. And considering the situation in Zhongcheng during the flood season, although the villa area is close to the lake, the terrain is very high, and even if the water rises, it is impossible for the house to be flooded. It can be said to be comprehensive. Behind the house is a forest, with neighbors only on the left and right sides. Sales enthusiastically introduced. Mr. Su, the main purpose of our building is to be quiet and quiet. We are looking for a peaceful residence in such a big city. We try our best to create all garden designs in accordance with the natural ecology, and at the same time we do a lot of biological prevention and control work, so that you can experience the quiet life in the forest without being disturbed by all kinds of nasty snakes, insects, rats, and ants in the deep mountains and old forests. Influence. Quote, "Being close to nature to a certain extent is our slogan. After all, no one can bear to live in a pure natural wilderness these days, are you right? Look at the lake in front. On the side close to the villa, we have specially fenced it to prevent garbage from floating in. At the same time, we have also stocked a large number of native fish from the river in the water. And there are dedicated people for feeding. If you have a hobby of fishing, you can fish at will after becoming our owner. All kinds of fish in the fence are farmed by us, and you can also fish them by professionals. More than 100 excellent fishing spots have been built into special fishing platforms. This is an exclusive benefit for single-family villa owners. You can choose any fishing platform as your private fishing platform at any time, and you can go there at any time. This is included with the purchase of the villa and does not cost you any extra money. In addition to the fish in the lake, you can also pick some things produced in the woods behind you. The fruit trees inside are regularly taken care of. And there are mushrooms in the woods this season, and many owners just like this. I will take time to pick mushrooms in the forest and eat them when I have nothing to do. After all, this is truly natural and pollution-free. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.